Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a walk into a place where the ground itself wants you dead. Forget the big battles and movie scenes of helicopters dropping into clearings. We're talking about the quiet killers of the Vietnam War. The traps that didn't care if you were strong, fast or careful. The ones built from bamboo, rope and a little imagination that could end you faster than a bullet. You probably wouldn't survive a single patrol. So before we begin, make sure you're comfortable, maybe dim the lights, and let whatever noise is around you fade into the background. And if you enjoy these strange dives into the worst parts of history, you can always support by subscribing, but only if you actually like what I do here. I'd love to hear in the comments where you're listening from, and if it's night or morning for you. It's always fascinating to see how many different time zones end up in the same quiet corner together. Alright, you're not sitting safely on your couch anymore. You've just woken up in a humid, mosquito-filled jungle in 1967. The air is heavy, the ground is soft, and every tree around you looks like it's hiding something. Your uniform is damp before the sun even rises. Sweat stings your eyes before you've taken your first step. And the worst part isn't the heat or the insects, or even the fear of an enemy you can't see. The worst part is knowing that the jungle floor has been turned into a weapon. Somewhere in front of you, hidden under leaves, buried in mud, or hanging from vines, is a trap waiting to rip you open. And you'll never know which one it is until it's too late. You open your eyes, but it doesn't feel like waking up. It feels like your body just gave up on trying to rest. You've been lying on damp ground that smells like mildew, sweat, and stale socks that never had a chance to dry. Your boots are still on, because no one in their right mind takes them off out here. Even if you wanted to, your laces are glued together by mud that has more grip strength than your fingers do. The jungle doesn't care if you slept. It was awake the entire night, buzzing, howling and dripping. Every inch of you is wet, and not the refreshing kind of wet. It's the sticky, sour, skin-itching wet that never goes away. The kind that makes you wonder if your own body has started to rot while you were unconscious. The heat is already pressing down, even though the sun has barely clawed its way above the trees. The air feels thick enough to chew. You inhale, and your lungs feel like they're taking in soup. There's no breeze, no fresh morning air, no gentle bird song to welcome you into the day. Instead, you get cicadas shrieking at a pitch designed by nature to ruin your sanity. Frogs croaking from some swamp just out of sight, and mosquitoes whining right next to your ears like drunk party guests who refuse to leave. You slap at your neck, then your arm, then your other arm, and you still lose. They're faster than you, hungrier than you, and there are millions of them. The ground beneath you isn't solid. It's a mattress of roots, mud, and things you don't want to identify by touch. Some of it wriggles when you shift your weight. Worms, leeches, maybe a spider the size of your hand. Pick your favourite. Either way, you're part of the ecosystem now. You smell like it too. Your uniform hasn't been clean since the day you got it. Sweat, dirt, and whatever mysterious liquid splashed onto you yesterday have combined into a scent that would clear a room back home. Here, though, it just attracts more insects. They don't care about deodorant, and even if you had some, it would have melted off in the first 5 minutes. You roll over, trying not to think about the ache in your lower back that hasn't left in weeks. Your spine feels like it's been replaced with bamboo. Every joint pops when you move, Not because you're old, but because the ground punishes you every night. You can hear the rest of your squad stirring, muttering curses under their breath, coughing, spitting, and trying to shake off another night of half-sleep. No one looks rested. No one ever does. The bags under your eyes are permanent now. You could sleep for a week and still look like someone punched you in the face. The first thing you notice, once the fog in your head starts to clear, isn't hunger or thirst. It's the silence that shouldn't be there. In a jungle, silence is dangerous. When the animals go quiet, it's not because they decided to let you sleep in. It's because something's wrong. Your brain knows it before you admit it. Somewhere out there, past the wall of leaves and shadows, there's a trap waiting. A piece of sharpened bamboo hidden under grass. A tripwire strung between trees. A hole dug so deep you'll never climb out of it. You can't see any of it, but you know it's there. The Viet Cong spent years turning this jungle into a maze of invisible weapons, and you're the unlucky contestant. Breakfast isn't eggs and bacon. It's a damp cracker from a ration pack that tastes like chalk mixed with sadness. You choke it down with water that's lukewarm and metallic, filtered just enough to not kill you today. Maybe you add a spoonful of instant coffee, the kind that tastes like someone whispered coffee over a cup of brown water. It doesn't help. Your head still feels heavy, your stomach still growls, and your body still wants another 8 hours of rest you'll never get. You stretch your legs, already swollen with bug bites and cuts from the last march. Your socks are permanently soaked, your toes blistered, and the smell rising from your boots could probably be classified as chemical warfare. The skin between your toes rubs raw with every step, but you don't get to take breaks for foot care when the ground itself is hostile. You tuck your pants back into your boots, knowing full well it won't stop the leeches from finding a way in. They always do. They wriggle into the smallest gaps, fattening themselves on your blood before you even feel them. By the time you notice, they're already hanging off your skin like pendulums. Your weapon feels heavier than it did yesterday. Not because it changed, but because you did. Every pound digs into your shoulders. The strap rubs your neck raw, and the metal sweats right along with you, slick and slippery in your hands. You sling it back into position anyway, because the one rule out here is simple. Don't let go of your rifle, ever. The enemy is invisible until they're not, and by then, if you're fumbling, it's too late. You look out over the trees, trying to see something useful, but the jungle doesn't give you straight lines. It's a wall of green, layered so thick that every direction looks the same. The canopy swallows the light, so even at noon it feels like dusk. Shadows shift and stretch until you can't tell if it's a bush or a person crouched behind it. Every vine looks like a tripwire. Every puddle looks like a pit. Your eyes never stop scanning, but your brain never catches up. You're always 1 second behind, and that 1 second is the difference between a normal step and a punji stake ripping through your foot. The fear doesn't scream at you. It whispers. It tells you that every move you make is probably the wrong one, that the ground isn't solid, the trees aren't safe, and the silence isn't empty. You hear a twig snap, and your whole body locks up, waiting for an explosion that doesn't come. You exhale and try to keep walking, but the thought sticks. Maybe the next twig will be the one. Maybe the next root you step on is attached to a wire. Maybe the next breath is your last. You don't get to argue with the jungle. You just keep moving. The mud pulls at your boots like it's trying to drag you under. Leeches climb your legs. Ants crawl under your collar and bite until your skin blisters. Mosquitoes cloud your vision, landing on your eyelids, your lips, even inside your nose. You swat, but it never helps. Out here, you're the buffet, and they're never full. The sweat dripping into your eyes burns, but wiping it away just smears more grime across your face. Your shirt clings to you, heavy and sour, and every breath feels like you're drinking the air instead of inhaling it. And this is just the beginning of the day. You haven't even taken a step off the beaten path yet. You haven't brushed against the wrong vine, or kicked the wrong branch, or leaned against the wrong tree. You haven't discovered the difference between a normal patch of dirt and one hiding sharpened stakes, but you will. Because no matter how careful you are, no matter how slowly you walk or how wide your eyes stay, the traps don't need you to make a big mistake. They just need you to take one more step forward. The jungle doesn't have silence. Not the kind you get in a quiet room or a sleepy neighbourhood. Out here, quiet means something's gone wrong. The normal soundtrack is relentless. Cicadas screaming like tiny chainsaws, birds shrieking as if they've just witnessed a crime, frogs belching out of sync, and mosquitoes whining directly in your ears. Then there's the drip, drip, drip of water, always falling from some invisible leaf above you, hitting your helmet or the back of your neck until you want to scream. Add in the shuffle of boots through mud, the metallic rattle of canteens, the occasional cough no one can hold back, and you've got a symphony of misery. It never stops. You walk with your ears wide open, and instead of reassurance, all that noise just feeds the paranoia. Every sound could be natural, or it could be the wrong sound in the wrong place. A twig snap? Maybe it's just a monkey. Or maybe it's the tripwire you almost touched. Leaves rustling. Could be the wind. Could also be a swinging trap full of spikes that's about to slam into your chest. Even your own heartbeat betrays you. It thuds so loudly in your ears that you start to think you won't hear the danger when it comes. Each step is an argument with yourself. You want to move forward, but the ground is lying to you. It looks normal, but normal doesn't exist here. A patch of dirt looks solid, but under it might be bamboo stakes coated with filth, waiting to skewer your foot and give you an infection that eats its way up your leg. That bundle of leaves might just be jungle debris, or it might be a cover for a pit big enough to swallow you whole. Even roots are suspect. They look harmless until you realise some of them have thin wires tied to them, stretched across the path, ready to yank the pin out of a grenade. You start stepping lighter. You try to distribute your weight like you're walking on ice, except the ice here sweats, shifts, and stinks. You look down for every step, but then your sergeant yells to keep your eyes up because you're supposed to scan for snipers. So now you're splitting your brain in half, one eye on the canopy for a glint of metal, the other on the ground for a wire thinner than a shoelace. You're not good enough to do both, and you know it. No one is. That's why the traps work. The fear doesn't come in jolts. It's steady. A low hum under your skin. It rides with you every second. You don't get to turn it off, even for a moment. You don't even get to scratch your arm without wondering if the movement will tug something hidden in the brush. You're sweating through your uniform, your belt digs into your waist, your pack pulls your shoulders down, and every time your boot sinks into mud, you imagine spikes wading at the bottom. The trap doesn't even have to hit you directly. Step wrong, and you cripple yourself. Limping in this jungle isn't just uncomfortable, it's a death sentence. You can't move fast enough, can't keep up, and no one can carry you for miles through this swamp. The soundtrack in your head adds to the jungle's noise. You start imagining sounds that aren't there. A faint click becomes a grenade pin. A sudden burst of bird calls sounds like the warning signal of an ambush. The buzz of insects turns into the hiss of something mechanical. Even though there's nothing mechanical out here, the line between real and imagined blurs, and your nerves stay fried on both. Your body never relaxes. Your muscles stay clenched so long that when you finally stop for a break, you can barely open your fists. Every few steps, someone in your unit whispers a warning. Watch your left. Step around that root. Don't touch that vine. The jungle isn't just attacking you, it's mocking you with variety. Some traps are obvious once you're inches away. Others are invisible even after they've gone off. The fear spreads through everyone like a second skin. You can see it in the way their heads twitch, the way their boots hesitate before hitting the ground, the way no one wants to be the point man, but no one dares admit it. And then, when it happens, when someone actually does step wrong, the soundtrack changes. The snap of a branch that isn't natural, the hollow thud of a cover giving way, the metallic ping of a wire pulled tight. It's always louder in your head than it really is, because the second it registers, chaos drowns it out. The scream, the scramble, the crash of bodies diving to the dirt. And if you're lucky, it's just a false alarm. If you're not, it's the wet, final sound of someone hitting spikes, or the deafening blast of an explosive tearing the air apart. And then, just like that, the jungle resets. The birds start shrieking again, the frogs croak, the insects buzz, the water drips, as if nothing happened. As if you didn't just watch someone bleed into the mud. Nature doesn't stop for you. It swallows the noise of your terror and hands you back the same endless soundtrack, daring you to take another step. The worst part isn't even when something happens. It's the waiting between. Walking, listening, sweating. Every nerve stretched so thin that even when the air shifts, your whole body jerks. The soundtrack of fear isn't just noise. It's the reminder that every step could be your last, and you'll never know it until it's too late. And you keep moving because there's no choice. The jungle won't let you pause, and the traps aren't going to spring themselves. The ground looks flat. That's the first lie. You've been staring at the dirt for hours now, trying to memorize what normal looks like, and the truth is, there is no normal. Every square foot of earth in this jungle is suspicious. But bamboo mats are the cruelest trick of them all. They look so harmless. Just a bit of woven plant material, the same stuff villagers use for walls, roofs, and sleeping mats. To your exhausted brain, they might even register as comforting for half a second, like something domestic in the middle of this nightmare. But under those thin strips of bamboo are fangs. Punji stakes. That's the official name, but it doesn't capture the horror. Imagine sharpened bamboo poles, sometimes hardened in fire, sometimes smeared with filth, and always angled to make sure they do maximum damage when you fall. They don't need to be deep, just long enough to pierce through your boot, into your foot, and keep going. A few inches, and you're done. Infection sets in faster than you can bandage it. Out here, antibiotics are scarce, and a medic can't stitch a shredded foot back together. One wrong step, and you're not walking again. And if you can't walk, you're not leaving. The mats are laid across pits like doors waiting to open. They're camouflaged with leaves, dirt, and whatever else blends in with the jungle floor. You can't tell the difference until your weight pushes down and then the mat gives way. There's no warning, no second chance. 1 second you're upright, sweating and cursing at mosquitoes. The next you're plunging downward, the world flipping as your body slams into sharpened stakes. They pierce legs, groins, torsos, wherever you land. And the pain isn't just immediate, it's designed to linger. Because these traps aren't only about killing, they're about maiming. A dead soldier is a tragedy, but a wounded one is a burden. You scream, your squad has to stop, drag you out, patch you up, and maybe carry you for miles. The trap didn't just take you down, it slowed everyone else. That was the point. The Viet Cong knew it. They built the jungle into a weapon of exhaustion, bleeding one man at a time until whole units fell apart. Picture what it feels like. Your foot slams down, expecting hard dirt, but the ground collapses. You drop into a hole lined with spikes, the sharpened bamboo punching through your thigh. You try to jerk free, but the stakes are angled downward, designed so that pulling away rips you open worse. Every movement tears more flesh. The pain blinds you, but the panic makes you thrash anyway, because your brain still thinks escape is possible. By the time your squad hauls you out, your uniform is soaked red, and the smell of blood mixes with the humid rot of the jungle. And then there's the infection. The spikes aren't clean. They're often smeared with human waste or animal dung, rubbed into the sharpened tips, so that even a shallow wound festers. The bacteria crawl in instantly. Your leg swells, the skin darkens, fever spikes, and in days you're useless. Not dead yet, just ruined. You get carried back, if anyone has the strength, and you sit in a tent somewhere shivering, waiting to see if the infection eats you alive before the morphine runs out. Some of the pits aren't even that deep. Just enough for a foot or ankle. That's enough. Step in, and the bamboo spikes drive up through your soul. You fall forward, hands hitting the mat, as more spikes punch through your palms. You don't even know which injury to scream about first. By the time your buddies drag you out, your body is already shaking, not just from pain, but from the knowledge that you'll never trust the ground again. Every step after that is slower, shakier, more haunted. There are variations too. Some pits are covered with mats that collapse slowly, so the soldier behind you falls instead of you. Some are disguised so well that entire squads go down one after another. A chain reaction of screams and blood. Others are lined not just with bamboo, but with metal shards, glass, or anything sharp enough to tear through flesh. The jungle supplied the raw materials, but human creativity made sure the traps were unforgettable. The sound of it stays with you. The crack of the mat giving way. The scream that follows. The thud of body hitting spikes. And then the desperate scrabble of hands trying to drag someone out before more damage is done. That soundtrack plays again and again. A reminder that no matter how careful you are, the ground beneath you is never safe. And once you've seen one, you can't stop seeing them. Every patch of dirt looks suspicious. Every shadow on the ground hides teeth. Your eyes scan so hard that they burn, but it doesn't matter. The mats look like leaves. The leaves look like mats. And eventually, fatigue wins. Your boots hit the wrong spot. The fangs open and the jungle takes its bite. You've been staring at the ground so long that your eyes ache. Every shadow looks like a lie. Every pile of leaves looks like an ambush waiting to happen. The sweat dripping into your eyes doesn't help, but you can't wipe it away. Both hands stay glued to your rifle. Out here, you don't relax, you don't trust, and you definitely don't stroll like you're on a Sunday walk. Every step is a gamble, and you already know the house always wins. Then it happens. You don't even notice the difference. The dirt in front of you looks the same as the last 1,000 steps. Brown, damp, boring. You've been so busy swatting mosquitoes and listening to your own heartbeat that you don't see the subtle sag in the earth. One more step forward and the jungle eats you alive. The ground disappears. That's the only way to describe it. 1 second, your boot lands on what feels solid. The next, it collapses like a trapdoor. Your stomach lurches. Gravity yanks you down before you can even yell. Your weapon slips in your grip. Your arms flail, grasping for anything. Roots, branches, a miracle. Nothing's there. The world tilts and spins. You're falling, but it's not far. Just deep enough. And then you hit. The pain is instant and blinding. You don't land on dirt. You land on sharpened bamboo. Punji stakes. They drive into your legs, thighs, torso, wherever you happen to angle in those few seconds of free fall. The spikes don't just pierce, they grab. They're cut at angles, designed so that once they enter, they tear worse if you try to pull away. Some are set to lean forward, so when you fall, you slide deeper onto them, weight dragging you farther down. You don't scream right away. The shock stuns you first. The air punches out of your lungs, your brain fizzles, and for half a heartbeat, you're just lying there, skewered, unable to process what just happened. Then the pain floods in, red, hot, and everywhere at once. Your body jerks and thrashes on instinct, and that makes it worse. Each movement drives the bamboo deeper, rips muscle wider, scrapes bone. You try to push yourself up, but your hands slip in blood and slime, and the more you fight, the more the trap wins. And it's never just bamboo. The spikes are smeared with something foul. Human waste, animal dung, rotten meat. Whatever the builders had on hand. The point isn't just to stab you. It's to poison you. Even if you survive the initial fall, infection starts its work immediately. Your wounds are filthy, your body is weak, and the jungle is a breeding ground for every disease you can imagine. The cut isn't the end. It's the beginning of a slow rot that will eat you alive, unless someone with a medic bag and a miracle finds you fast. Above you, the jungle doesn't care. The cicadas keep screaming, the frogs keep croaking, and your squad scrambles to the pit's edge. Shouts echo, ropes are thrown down, arms reach for you, but every attempt to move you sends another bolt of agony through your body. The stakes don't want to let you go. They've hooked you like a fish, and dragging you out means tearing new wounds open. You scream now, raw and hoarse, while your friends curse and strain, hauling your blood-slick body inch by inch. The pit itself is nothing fancy. Just a hole in the ground, maybe 6 or 7 feet deep, camouflaged with leaves and dirt. Simple, crude, but effective. It doesn't need to be complicated. The genius of it is in the design. It turns the earth itself into a weapon. Easy to build, nearly invisible, and devastatingly effective. The people who dug it didn't need an engineering degree. Just time, patience, and the knowledge that soldiers like you would eventually stumble by. And stumble you did. Once you're pulled free, the damage becomes clearer. Your legs are shredded, boots punctured, fabric torn, skin split open in jagged lines. Blood runs freely, pooling in the mud. Your squad medic kneels beside you, hands shaking as he tries to stop the bleeding. He knows the odds. Out here, you don't have a clean hospital or a sterile operating table. You have gauze, morphine, maybe a shot of penicillin if you're lucky, and luck is running thin. Even if you don't bleed out, even if the morphine dulls the pain enough to move you, you're done. You're not walking another mile through this jungle. You're not climbing hills, not wading swamps, not surviving another patrol. Your war ended the moment the ground gave way. The pit wasn't designed to kill you outright. It was designed to remove you from the fight, to force your friends to carry your weight, to slow everyone down, to bleed the unit dry one soldier at a time. The psychological toll is just as sharp as the stakes. Everyone who watched you fall now knows it could have been them. They start stepping slower, eyes darting, nerves fraying. The jungle becomes a minefield of doubt. Every patch of dirt could be a trapdoor. Every step a gamble. Morale seeps out of the unit like blood from your wounds. That's the true weapon of the Punji Pit. It doesn't just wound bodies, it wounds minds. And there are variations, cruel little tweaks to keep you guessing. Some pits are lined with stakes angled inward, so when you fall, they trap you like a cage. Some are filled with water at the bottom, turning the stakes into submerged spears that pierce deeper as you sink. Others are left empty, designed to break legs with the fall alone. And sometimes the pits are rigged with explosives, because apparently bamboo wasn't bad enough on its own. Each version serves the same purpose, to remind you that the ground beneath your feet is not your ally. It's the enemy. The smell lingers. Blood, rot, damp earth. You carry it with you even if you weren't the one who fell. You can't step past a pile of leaves without imagining the stench wafting up again. You hear the echo of the scream, the thud of the fall, the crack of bamboo, and it replays in your head every time your boot hits soft soil. Sleep doesn't erase it. Nothing does. And the cruelest part is how cheap and easy it all is. A rifle costs money, bullets cost money, artillery shells cost money. A Punji pit costs nothing but time and bamboo. It's war on a budget, and it's brutally efficient. While you're dragging your wounded out, the enemy is miles away, already digging the next hole. You never see them. You never hear them. Just the ground collapsing and another body screaming. So you keep walking, boots heavy, heart heavier, ears straining for sounds that never come in time, because the jungle doesn't warn you. The pit doesn't care who you are. And sooner or later, another step will be the one that gives way. The ground has already betrayed you enough times. You've been stabbed by bamboo mats, nearly swallowed by pits, and every patch of dirt feels like it's plotting against you. But at least the earth makes sense. It's beneath you, and that's where you expect danger to be. Then the jungle reminds you that it isn't satisfied with just attacking your boots. It wants to come at you from every direction, including above. That's when the swinging spike traps appear. You don't see them until it's too late. How could you? They're hidden in the trees, suspended by ropes, balanced just right, waiting for a tripwire to set them loose. At first glance, it looks like nothing. Just leaves and vines blending into the canopy. The jungle is so dense that you wouldn't notice another log hanging in the mess. But what's waiting overhead isn't a log. It's a log sharpened to a point, or studded with spikes, or loaded with nails scavenged from who knows where. And the second someone brushes against the wrong vine, or catches the wrong wire, gravity takes over. Imagine walking through a narrow trail, sweat dripping into your eyes, vision blurred by heat and exhaustion. You're scanning the ground like your life depends on it, because it does, and you don't see the thin tripwire stretched across chest height. It's nearly invisible, hidden under leaves, the same colour as the vines wrapped around every tree. Your rifle snags it as you step forward, and the wire snaps tight. That's the trigger. A split second later, there's a rush of movement from above. The air whistles, the branches shake, and you barely have time to glance up before it slams into you. A log bristling with sharpened stakes swings down like a pendulum of death. It smashes into your body with the weight of a battering ram, spikes driving into flesh, ribs cracking under the force. If you're lucky, it knocks you flat and the spikes miss anything vital. If you're not, they drive straight through your chest, or your neck, or your skull. And just like that, the jungle takes another. The sound is unforgettable. The creak of rope as it tightens, the whoosh of the swinging log, and then the impact, flesh, bone, wood colliding in one sickening thud. Sometimes it's followed by a scream, sometimes by silence, but always by the collective intake of breath from everyone nearby. Because they know that if it hadn't been you, it would have been them. The trap doesn't care who it hits. It only needs one mistake. The brutality of it isn't just in the killing power. It's in the simplicity. These traps are made from nothing more than what the jungle offers. Wood, vines, bamboo, nails, sometimes even shards of metal or glass. They don't require an engineer, just patience and a cruel imagination. A single person could build one in a few hours, then walk away, leaving it to dangle above the path like a hidden executioner. And it could wait days, weeks, even months before someone triggers it. The worst part is that you start to look up, as if you didn't already have enough to watch. The ground for pits, the bushes for ambushes, the canopy for snipers. You now have to scan the trees for hidden pendulums of death. Every branch becomes suspicious. Every dangling vine looks like a rope. Your neck aches from jerking upwards so often. And still, it's never enough. The jungle has too many shadows, too many angles, too many places for death to hide. Picture trying to walk after you've seen one of these traps go off. Your buddy just got flattened, skewered, or knocked unconscious by a swinging log. You've watched him bleed into the mud while the squad medic tries to patch holes that look like they were punched in by a medieval battering ram. Now you're supposed to keep moving. Your boots shuffle forward, but your eyes dart up every few seconds, scanning for ropes, mats, logs, anything that looks out of place. The paranoia spreads until you're jumping at the sound of branches shifting, even if it's just a monkey leaping overhead. And sometimes the traps don't just swing once. Some are designed to reset, tied with counterweights and ropes, so that they can hit multiple soldiers in succession. One man trips the wire, the log slams through him, then it yanks back, and the next unlucky soul gets hit on the rebound. It's not just about taking one life. It's about turning the trail into a conveyor belt of misery. Variations keep you guessing. Some traps use multiple spikes tied together, like a cluster of bamboo spears, swinging down in a fan to hit several soldiers at once. Others are mounted higher, so the log arcs down from above head height, catching the tallest men square in the chest or skull. And there are even traps designed to slam upward, bamboo springing from below when a soldier steps on the wrong trigger, launching spikes into legs and groins, while a swinging log follows from the side. One hit is bad enough. 2 hits at once is catastrophic. The jungle amplifies it all. The air is already hot, thick and suffocating. Add the panic of knowing that death might drop on you from the treetops, and it feels like the canopy itself is closing in. The weight of your pack digs into your shoulders, sweat soaks through your shirt, your rifle slips in your hands, and you still can't relax. Every creak of wood, every groan of rope, every shift of branches sets your nerves on fire. Even when nothing happens, the fear does its job. You're drained before the day is half over. And the cruelty isn't just physical, it's psychological warfare. The Viet Cong didn't need to win every battle outright. They just needed you exhausted, paranoid, second-guessing every step and every glance. A swinging spike trap doesn't just injure the body, it poisons the mind. Even if no one is hit, the knowledge that it could happen at any moment eats away at morale. Soldiers walk slower, eyes darting, hearts pounding, focus fraying, and a distracted, fearful soldier is easier prey for everything else the jungle has waiting. The image of the trap sticks with you. The way it swung out of nowhere. The way it blended so perfectly into the foliage. The way it left someone broken on the ground, while the forest carried on around them as if nothing had happened. You'll never walk under a tree the same way again. Not here, not anywhere. The jungle has turned even the act of moving forward into a gamble you can't win. And just when you think you've gotten used to the idea, you realise the jungle isn't done. Because if the ground can betray you, and the trees can betray you, then every inch of space between is just waiting for the next trap to spring. When you think of a doorway, you probably imagine something safe, a place to pass through, an opening that leads you forwards, maybe even a welcome change from the endless claustrophobia of the jungle. In the middle of Vietnam, though, a doorway isn't an invitation. It's a trap with hinges. And the only thing waiting behind it is pain. The Viet Cong understood something simple. Soldiers hate crawling through tight spaces. You're loaded down with gear, sweating bullets, nerves fried, and suddenly you're ordered to check out a hut, a shack, or a tunnel entrance that looks just wide enough to squeeze through. Your instincts are already screaming no, but orders are orders. You duck low, step forward, and put your hand on the edge of the door. You've walked into the bait. The doorway that bites back is cruel in its efficiency. It looks ordinary enough. Bamboo or wood lashed together. Maybe a flap of woven reeds hanging down. Nothing that screams danger. But the moment you push through, you trigger the mechanism. A spiked frame swings down from the top, or sideways from the hinge, slamming into your body with the force of a battering ram. Nails, sharpened bamboo, metal scraps, anything that could pierce flesh was fixed onto it, and gravity did the rest. The sensation is nothing like you expect. You've spent so much time watching the ground and the trees that you don't anticipate the wall itself lunging at you. 1 second you're stepping forward, the next you're pinned, the breath ripped from your lungs, as sharpened wood drives into your shoulders or chest. The spikes don't just bruise, they puncture. They rip through fabric, skin, and muscle in one smooth motion. The doorway doesn't swing politely. It bites like a predator snapping shut on prey. And if you think you'll just push it off, think again. Many of these traps were weighted or angled so that once they hit, they stayed in place. The spikes didn't just stab, they pressed in, forcing you down, pinning you against the floor. You're caught, writhing like a bug in a net, while your squad scrambles to figure out how to pry the thing loose without driving it in deeper. All the while you're screaming into the dirt, tasting blood and sweat, while the jungle watches silently. There's also the sound, the crack of bamboo poles as they snap into motion, the thud of wood colliding with flesh, the grunt of air leaving your lungs. And then the aftermath, the groans, the yells, the frantic commands to get a medic. If you're on the outside watching, that sound etches into your brain forever. You never walk through a doorway again without flinching. The ingenuity of these traps came from their adaptability. Some were built into huts, waiting for soldiers to kick in the door. Others were rigged into tunnel systems, where crawling through the dark meant crawling into your own coffin. A few were even portable, frames set up along narrow jungle paths, disguised until the unlucky lead man brushed past and got skewered in the ribs. Each version worked the same way: lure you into thinking you were just crossing a threshold, then punish you for trusting the opening. And then there's the filth. Just like punji steaks, the spikes were often coated in waste or toxins to guarantee infection. It wasn't enough to stab you. The goal was to make sure you rotted from the inside out. Even if you survived the initial hit, the fever and swelling that followed could take you out of the fight within days. Out here, with no sterile hospitals or endless supplies of antibiotics, a puncture wound was a slow-moving death sentence. The psychological weight of these traps was immense. Soldiers already hated moving through villages or abandoned structures because every door looked suspicious. You'd stop at the threshold, rifle raised, sweat dripping, heart pounding, knowing full well that if you stepped wrong, the entire building might collapse on you. And then, once you'd seen someone actually get caught in one of these spiked jaws, hesitation became permanent. Every doorway became a question. Was it safe, or was it waiting to bite? The paranoia spread beyond the jungle. Men who returned home later described being unable to walk through their own front doors without a flicker of dread, a creak in the frame, a draft of air, the sound of hinges. It all brought back the memory of traps snapping shut. That's the kind of scar these devices left. Not just physical, but permanent in the mind. And let's not forget the cruelty of placement. These door traps weren't usually random. They were often set in places where soldiers were most likely to feel relief. A hut offering shade from the brutal sun. A tunnel offering a shortcut past a swamp. A shack that might hold supplies. The trap took your moment of lowered guard and turned it into agony. The jungle wasn't just fighting you. It was mocking you, reminding you that comfort didn't exist here. Some variations were even nastier. Double traps, for instance. One doorway spiked frame slamming forward, followed immediately by another hidden behind it. If you somehow avoided the first, you got nailed by the second. Others were rigged with grenades, turning the spiked doorway into an explosive finale. And a few were crafted with sharpened stakes angled downward. So once the frame dropped, it pinned you by the shoulders and drove spikes directly into your torso. Quick, efficient, and devastating. The fear of these traps changed how you moved. Instead of kicking doors in like the war movies taught you, you prodded at them with sticks, bayonets, anything that kept your body out of reach. Progress slowed to a crawl. Every opening became a test, every flap of bamboo a potential executioner. And that was the real genius behind it. Even if the trap didn't kill, even if it didn't catch anyone that day, it did its job. It made you afraid to move. It drained your confidence, step by step, doorway by doorway. Meanwhile, The enemy didn't even have to be there. They could set the trap and vanish, already digging another hole, rigging another wire, sharpening another stake. You weren't fighting an enemy you could see. You were fighting doors, floors, walls, ceilings, the entire environment weaponized against you. The jungle itself was the soldier, and it never got tired. So you kept going, inching forward, nerves shot, sweat soaking your uniform. You learned to expect that even the places that looked safe, the huts, the shade, the doorways, were just waiting to snap shut on you. Because in Vietnam, every threshold wasn't an entrance. It was an ambush disguised as a welcome. And beyond the doors, the jungle still had more surprises waiting. Because if the walls could attack, and the floor could attack, and the trees could attack, then there was no part of this war zone that wasn't out to take a piece of you. You already don't trust the ground. It's lied to you with bamboo mats, swallowed you with pits, and yanked your body apart with sharpened stakes. But at least those traps gave you some warning. A crack, a snap, a moment of falling before the pain hit. Landmines don't bother with theatrics. They don't creak, they don't swing, and they don't wait for you to realise what's happening. They just turn the ordinary ground into a hidden trigger that erases you in a single step. And the worst part is, the ground looks normal. That's the whole trick. A path packed with dirt. A patch of grass that looks just like every other patch. A clearing where your boots sink only a little deeper in the mud. You take a step, shift your weight, and suddenly the world explodes. That's it. No drama, no second chance. You didn't just step on soil. You stepped on a weapon disguised as soil. The variety is endless. Anti-personnel mines. Improvised mines built from unexploded American ordnance. Pressure plates hidden under thin boards. Grenades buried in cans, their pins tied to tripwires stretched just above the ground. The Viet Cong turned the earth into an endless catalogue of ways to kill you, all while you walked forward thinking it was just another mile of jungle. Every square foot of dirt could be a bomb, and you'd never know until your leg was gone. Picture it. You're trudging along, rifle heavy in your hands, pack cutting into your shoulders, sweat blinding your eyes. The air is thick, your boots squish in mud, and your brain is too fried to keep scanning every inch. You step forward like you've done thousands of times already. Then, click. A sound so faint you barely hear it, but your body knows. Your stomach drops. Your breath freezes. You've just stepped on something that isn't dirt. In that split second, your brain races through impossible choices. Stay perfectly still and pray. Try to shift your weight back and risk triggering it fully. Yell for help and hope someone knows how to disarm it. You don't get long to think. Sometimes the mine is instant, blowing you sky high before the click even registers. Other times, there's a fraction of a pause, just enough for the terror to hit before the explosion does. And then heat, fire, and metal shred through flesh. Your legs vanish, your body slams into the dirt, and the jungle fills with smoke and screams. And it doesn't end there. Mines don't just kill the person who steps on them. They're designed to hurt everyone nearby. Shrapnel flies out in all directions, jagged, red, hot fragments that rip through skin, tear muscle, puncture organs. If you're standing 10 feet away, you don't escape. Maybe it doesn't take your leg, but it'll take your arm, your eye, your sense of hearing. Mines don't care about precision. They're indiscriminate, messy, and unforgiving. Even when they don't detonate, they win. You see a patch of dirt that looks suspicious. Maybe it's a little too flat. Maybe it's a little too raised. Maybe it's nothing. But you freeze anyway. You call for engineers. You probe the ground with sticks. You wait for someone braver to take the step. Every delay burns time, energy, and nerves. The mind doesn't even have to be real to paralyse you. The idea of it is enough. The paranoia spreads through every movement. Walking turns into a ritual. You watch the man ahead of you, trying to place your boots exactly where his were. You avoid patches of soil that look disturbed, but then you realise the enemy knows you'll avoid them. So maybe they trap the spots that look untouched. You see a can half buried in the dirt, and your heart seizes. Is it garbage, or is it a grenade rigged to blow the second you touch it? Every step feels like your last, and the soundtrack in your head is nothing but ticking clocks. And then there are the booby-trapped mines. Because apparently, stepping on one bomb wasn't bad enough. Some were wired so that when you tried to disarm them, a second charge went off. Others were set to delay, exploding not under the first foot but the second, so that when one soldier thought he was safe, the man behind him got obliterated. It was cruelty stacked on cruelty, a layered game designed to make you question every piece of ground forever. Even the aftermath was gruesome. A man blown apart by a mine doesn't just collapse. He disappears in a flash of red and smoke, and what's left isn't something you ever forget. Legs gone, shredded bone sticking out of what used to be flesh. Blood soaking into the soil so fast it turns black. The screams that follow are the kind that stick to you, high-pitched and raw, echoing through the jungle long after the explosion fades. Medics rush in, but what can they do? Tourniquets, morphine, a frantic call for evacuation that may or may not come in time. Sometimes it's quicker to give a dying man a cigarette and hold his hand while the jungle finishes the job. And the mines don't just take soldiers. Civilians walk these same paths. Farmers, children, families. The war didn't end when battle stopped. The mines stayed. They outlived the fighting, turning rice paddies and villages into graveyards for decades. For soldiers, that meant knowing that even if you survived the day, the ground you just crossed would keep killing long after you left. The jungle wasn't just a battlefield. It was permanently cursed. The sound of it never leaves you. The muffled boom, the spray of dirt and blood, the silence that follows for half a second before the screaming starts. You hear it in your sleep. You hear it in your bones. And every time you walk across an ordinary patch of earth back home, some part of you expects it to explode. That's how deep the fear burrows in. And the jungle had no shortage of patience. It could wait forever. The mines didn't rust quickly. They didn't rot. They didn't care about the seasons. They sat, hidden and silent, while you trudged forward mile after mile, daring you to step wrong. You didn't need to be careless. You just needed to be human. One misplaced footstep, and the ground decided your story was over. And if the earth could be turned into a weapon this easily, then what chance did you have with the vines, the trees and the rivers still waiting ahead? You've been told 1,000 times to watch your step. Keep your eyes on the ground. Scan every patch of dirt, every pile of leaves. But the jungle doesn't just attack from below. Sometimes the danger waits at shin level, knee height, chest height, or even stretched so thin it may as well be invisible. That's the problem with tripwires. You'll never see them coming until it's too late, and by then you're already in pieces. The Viet Cong loved tripwires because they were simple, cheap, and devastating. A thin piece of wire, string, or vine stretched across a path, connected to something that explodes, swings, or impales. That's it. Nothing fancy. Just a booby trap you couldn't spot, even if you were staring straight at it. In the dense tangle of jungle, with shadows flickering and sweat blurring your eyes, spotting one was like trying to see a single hair in a thunderstorm. Picture this. You're trudging forward, boots dragging in the mud, rifle heavy in your hands. You're scanning for pits, spikes, landmines, everything on the ground, but your vision doesn't stretch high enough. A wire, thinner than a pencil, cuts across the path just at ankle height. It blends perfectly with the vines curling out of the underbrush. You don't notice. How could you? And then your foot hooks it. There's the faintest tug. A second of resistance. Then the world erupts. Sometimes it's a grenade, tied to the wire so that when it pulls, the pin comes loose. The explosion is instant, ripping through the undergrowth and tearing flesh from bone. Sometimes it's an artillery shell repurposed into an improvised mine, buried in the dirt with just a wire leading out. That one doesn't just kill you. It takes out everyone walking within 20 feet. And sometimes it's not an explosion at all. The tripwire yanks loose a spiked log from above, sending it swinging straight into your chest like a battering ram covered in knives. The beauty of the tripwire, if you can call it that, is its versatility. Anything could be rigged to it. Grenades, mines, shotguns propped up and aimed at head height, flamethrower traps built from fuel cans, even crossbows hidden in the foliage. You never knew what the wire was connected to until it was too late. One step, and you weren't just unlucky, you were a demonstration of just how many creative ways a human body can be broken. And it wasn't just about killing. Like punji steaks, tripwires were often designed to maim. A grenade set at shin level might blow your legs apart, but leave you screaming, forcing your squad to stop and carry you. A spiked board rigged to swing into your gut might not kill you outright, but it left you bleeding, vomiting, and begging for morphine. The trap didn't need to erase you completely. It just needed to make you a burden, to slow everyone else down, to drain morale one scream at a time. The paranoia these wires created was endless. You couldn't trust your eyes anymore, because the wires were nearly invisible. Instead you started walking like a puppet, legs jerking higher, boots stomping carefully, rifle raised like it could somehow protect you from the invisible threads crisscrossing the path. Every time a vine brushed your shin, you froze. Every time your pack straps snagged a branch, you panicked. The jungle was already suffocating. Now it felt like it was strung together with live traps, ready to detonate the second you touched them. The tension seeped into everything. Patrols slowed to a crawl, each man prodding the path ahead with sticks, bayonets, anything to catch the wires before they caught him. The pace dropped to a few agonizing feet per minute. Hours stretched like days. And even then, the wires still got you. Because no matter how careful you were, the jungle was patient. The enemy had threaded these traps into the terrain like spider webs, and you were the insect blundering into them. And when one went off, the aftermath was chaos. An explosion ripped through the trees, smoke and dirt filling the air, bodies dropping in pieces. The survivors dove for cover, rifles raised, hearts hammering, waiting for an ambush that might not even come. Because often, the trap itself was the ambush. The Viet Cong didn't need to attack. They just let the wire do the work. By the time you realised no enemy was firing, it didn't matter. You'd already lost men. You'd already bled into the jungle floor. The trap had done its job without a single bullet fired. What really made tripwires terrifying was the fact that they didn't expire. Pits could fill in, spikes could rot, but a wire, stretched tight and hidden under leaves, could last for months. The jungle disguised it perfectly. Rain washed dirt over it, vines grew alongside it, and it became just another part of the terrain. You couldn't even trust paths you'd already walked. A trail that was clear yesterday could be strung with wires today. The jungle was alive, constantly shifting, and every shift might mean another line waiting to take you apart. Soldiers learned to fear the tiniest sensations: a tug at the ankle, a snap against the shin, a faint vibration in the air when something brushed their leg. And sometimes it wasn't even a tripwire. It was just a root, a branch, a vine. But the fear was real enough to freeze you in your tracks. Heart hammering, sweat pouring down your face. And the enemy knew that fear was worth more than any single explosion. Fear slowed you down. Fear drained your energy. Fear made you break apart long before the jungle did. And the wires weren't always horizontal. Some were strung vertically, at neck height, designed to yank the pin on a grenade or fire a hidden shotgun directly into your face. Others were rigged diagonally, connected to multiple traps at once, so one tug triggered an entire chain reaction of chaos. One soldier tripped the wire, and suddenly the whole squad was under fire from traps they never saw. You couldn't predict it, couldn't prepare for it, and definitely couldn't relax. The worst ones were set in tunnels. You were already crawling in the dark, sweating, heart racing, when your hand brushes a thin wire stretched across the dirt. You don't even realise what you've touched before the explosion rips through the narrow space, collapsing the tunnel and turning it into your coffin. There was no safe place, not above ground, not below it. The wires were everywhere, and if you survived one, you didn't escape unscathed. The explosion might shred your legs, blind you, deafen you. Shrapnel dug into your body and stayed there festering in wounds too deep to dig out. Burns scarred your skin. Your lungs filled with smoke. You crawled out alive, but you never walked the same way again. Every scar was a reminder that the jungle had teeth you couldn't see. And the wires were cheap. That's what made them so effective. A grenade here, some string there. The cost of a single trap was pennies compared to the cost of removing it. Engineers could spend hours clearing a path, probing every inch, and still miss one. The Viet Cong didn't need money. They needed patience. And patience was free. So you walked forward, eyes straining, boots dragging, rifle heavy, knowing full well that somewhere in the shadows a wire was waiting. And the cruelest part, you'd never see it until it caught you. That was the point. The wire wasn't just a trap, it was a promise. A promise that every step, every inch, every breath might be the one that snapped the thread and set the jungle on fire around you. The earth under your boots already feels like a liar. You've seen it collapse into pits, sprout sharpened bamboo fangs, and click beneath you with the promise of an explosion. But some traps don't just sit in holes waiting for you to fall. Some are buried deeper, disguised better, wired tighter. Explosives hidden inside the earth. Those are the ones that remind you the ground itself isn't ground anymore. It's a grave that you haven't fallen into yet. The Viet Cong turned the soil into their armoury. They didn't need factories or expensive weapons. They had shovels, scraps of metal, and the endless supply of unexploded American ordnance that littered the countryside like toxic confetti. Artillery shells that didn't go off, mortar rounds, dud bombs, All of it could be dug up, rewired, and replanted. And once it was buried under a few inches of dirt, it wasn't a dud anymore. It was a silent, waiting predator. Imagine walking across a path that looks like every other path. Packed earth, a layer of fallen leaves, maybe a bit of grass pushing through. You've walked 1,000 miles of this terrain already. Your boots sink slightly in the mud. You're hot, hungry, distracted by the sweat dripping down your back. And then it happens. Your heel presses just a little harder than it should. Underneath, a pressure plate clicks, and the explosive hidden below comes alive. There isn't always time to react. Sometimes the detonation is instant, ripping you and everyone nearby into the air in a storm of dirt, fire, and jagged metal. 1 second you're walking, the next you're nothing but red mist hanging in the jungle humidity. Other times there's a sickening pause, a split second between the click and the boom. Enough time for your stomach to twist, for your brain to scream, for your squad mates to realise what's about to happen. And then the blast takes you all anyway. The creativity of these buried explosives was endless. A single 105mm shell rigged to a pressure plate could wipe out half a patrol in an instant. A cluster of smaller charges buried in a pattern could create a kill zone of flying shrapnel. Some were wired to tripwires above ground, others to timers, others to remote triggers waiting in the hands of someone watching from the tree line. The ground wasn't just dangerous, it was unpredictable. You never knew if the step you were taking was the one that set off a chain reaction, and the shrapnel was the real killer. The blast might not vaporize you completely, but the fragments would. Jagged pieces of steel, nails, bits of bamboo, even rock sharpened by the force of the explosion. They tore through flesh like paper. They punctured lungs, shredded arteries, split skulls. And they didn't stop at the first man. Shrapnel fanned out in all directions, hitting everyone in range, embedding deep into muscle and bone. Wounds that didn't kill you outright became infected, festered, and turned lethal days later. The sound of it was unforgettable. A deep, muffled thud, the kind that rattled your teeth and shook your bones. The air filled with smoke and dirt, choking your lungs before you even registered the pain. And then came the screams. High-pitched, raw, primal. Screams of men with half their bodies missing, of medics frantically trying to stop the bleeding with trembling hands, of soldiers realising they couldn't even find all the pieces of their friends. The aftermath was just as cruel as the blast itself. Craters dotted the paths, filled with mud and blood, reminders that the earth had swallowed someone whole. Patrols slowed to a crawl, every step prodded with sticks, every patch of dirt treated like a loaded gun. Engineers came in with metal detectors, but even those weren't perfect. The jungle was filled with metal debris, false signals, distractions. You could spend hours clearing a single stretch of road, only for the next 20 feet to hold another hidden shell. The psychological toll was enormous. You stopped trusting the ground. You stopped trusting yourself. Every step became a negotiate. Left foot here, right foot there. Don't step too hard. Don't stray off the beaten path. And yet, even the beaten path wasn't safe. Convoys rolled over roads, cleared the day before and still blew sky high because someone buried a fresh charge overnight. You learned quickly that nothing stayed clear. Nothing stayed safe. The jungle reset the board every morning. And then there were the delayed fuses. Some explosives were buried with timers or chemical delays, designed to detonate hours after being triggered. A soldier might walk over the spot in the morning, and it wouldn't explode until afternoon, taking out the next patrol. Sometimes trucks roll safely past, only for the last one in line to vanish in a fireball. The randomness was part of the weapon. You could never predict when or who it would strike. Civilians weren't spared either. Farmers ploughing their fields, kids walking to school, families trying to rebuild their lives. The buried explosives didn't discriminate. Long after battles ended, long after soldiers moved on, the earth kept exploding. Rice paddies turned into minefields. Villages became graveyards. Generations learned that even farming the land could mean death. The war ended on paper, but in reality, the ground never stopped killing. The cruelty of it all was in how cheap it was. A single artillery shell, rewired and buried, cost the Viet Cong almost nothing. The United States could spend millions on helicopters, tanks, bombs and airstrikes, but all of that was undone by a $10 shovel and a bit of ingenuity. You weren't fighting an equal opponent. You were fighting the ground itself. And the ground was infinitely patient. The paranoia sank deep into your bones. Even when you weren't on patrol, you felt it. Lying in your cot at night, you'd replay every step of the day, wondering if you missed the telltale bulge in the dirt, the slight discoloration of the soil, the too smooth patch of ground. You dreamed of the click. You woke up sweating, heart pounding, toes curling in your boots as if bracing for the blast that never came. And when it finally did come, when the earth erupted under someone's foot, the lesson was reinforced again. The ground isn't ground. It's a trap disguised as stability. Every step forward is a gamble. Every mile is a lottery where the prize is survival, and the losing ticket is being blown into pieces too small to bury. And as if that weren't enough, the jungle wasn't done. Because if the dirt could hide bombs, then so could the rivers, the trees, and even the sky. Out here, every direction had teeth, and you were just another body walking into the moor. You've already had the ground betray you. You've seen pits open under your boots, wires tug grenades out of hiding, and buried shells erupt without warning. You've learned not to trust the trees, the leaves, the vines, or even the air. But then the jungle gets personal. It stops using just wood and metal. It starts using teeth and venom. Because sometimes the trap waiting for you isn't a spike or a bomb. Sometimes it's alive. Sometimes it hisses. The snake in a box trap sounds ridiculous at first, almost like something out of a prank show. Until you realise it was one of the cruelest psychological tricks in the war. The Viet Cong knew the jungle was already crawling with snakes, cobras, kraits, vipers, each one armed with venom potent enough to drop a man in minutes. They didn't need to invent monsters. They just needed to weaponize the ones that were already there. The setup was simple. Find a snake, put it in a container, usually a bamboo tube, a wooden box, sometimes even an old ammo can, and position it in a place where a soldier's hands would go. A door handle, a trapdoor latch, a tunnel hatch, a supply crate. Tie the lid with a thin wire or prop it open with a trigger. The moment you touched it, the snake was released. And it didn't come out calm. It came out furious, striking at the first thing it saw. Your face, your arm, your neck. Picture the moment. You're sweating through your uniform, crouched in front of a tunnel entrance. You've been told to check the hatch. Your hands are already trembling, not from fear exactly, but from exhaustion, nerves, the constant hum of dread that never leaves. You reach forward, fingers closing around a simple bamboo handle. You give it a tug, and the lid pops. But instead of wood, you're staring at scales. A cobra uncoils, mouth open, fangs flashing, venom dripping. You don't even have time to scream before it lunges at your face. The bite is quick, almost anticlimactic. A sting on the cheek, the hand, the neck. But then the venom goes to work. Burning, throbbing pain spread like fire under your skin. Your muscles seize, your vision blurs, your throat swells. Breathing turns into a desperate, choking struggle. You drop your rifle, claw at your skin, stumble backward while your squad shouts in panic. The medic digs frantically through his pack, but anti-venom isn't always available, and even when it is, the clock is ticking fast. Out here, a snake bite isn't just a wound, it's a countdown, and the jungle doesn't make it easy. Snakes were already a constant threat. Step in the wrong patch of grass, and you'd disturb one curled up in the shade. Crawl through a tunnel, and a viper might already be waiting in the dark. Add the deliberate cruelty of snake-in-a-box traps, and suddenly every container, every door, every box looked like it was alive. You weren't just fighting hidden spikes. You were fighting the possibility that anything you touched might sink fangs into you. The psychological toll was devastating. Men were already terrified of the jungle's natural snakes, many of which blended so perfectly into the terrain that you'd only see them after you'd stepped on them. Now you had to worry about artificial encounters, snakes deliberately placed where you least expected them. Opening a crate of supplies should have been a relief. Instead, it became another source of dread. Was it food? Or was it a venomous ambush waiting to take you down? And unlike a gunshot or an explosion, a snake bite was intimate. The animal was right there, hissing, writhing, striking again if you didn't move fast enough. You didn't just lose flesh. You felt the venom spread, slow and cruel, reminding you of every heartbeat that your body was failing. Explosions ended things in an instant. Snake traps let you watch yourself unravel, minute by minute. The ingenuity of it all was in how little it cost. A length of bamboo, a bit of twine, a captured snake, that was enough. The Viet Cong could set dozens of these traps in a single day. They didn't need to fight you directly. They just needed to let the jungle's natural residents do the killing for them. It wasn't just warfare. It was outsourcing death to the local wildlife. The variations made it worse. Some traps weren't just snakes in containers. Some tied snakes to sticks or boxes, so that when disturbed, the reptile lashed out in panic. Others suspended bamboo tubes above doorways, so that when you pushed the flap aside, a snake literally dropped onto your shoulders. Imagine that for a second. Hot, coiled muscle and scales sliding across your neck. Fangs burying into your skin while you scream and flail. That's not a trap. That's a nightmare given physical form. Even when the trap didn't go off, the fear lingered. You'd open a box carefully, hands trembling, breath shallow, only to find nothing inside. But your heart would still be pounding in your throat, your palms slick with sweat, because you knew it could have been. That possibility was the weapon. It slowed you down, made you suspicious, drained your focus. The enemy didn't need the snake to strike every time. They just needed you to believe it might. The aftermath of a successful bite was horrific. Swelling turned limbs into grotesque balloons. Skin blackened around the puncture marks. Victims vomited, convulsed, and slipped into unconsciousness. Medics did what they could, but resources were limited, and the jungle was not forgiving. Some men lingered for hours, begging for relief, while their squad mates sat helplessly beside them, rifles clutched tight, eyes darting at the shadows, waiting for another trap. And the cruelty extended beyond soldiers. Locals knew these tricks too. Farmers, children, villagers. They learned quickly that boxes, crates and doors might hide more than food or shelter. Fear spread through everyone who lived in the war zone. The jungle didn't distinguish between combatant and civilian. The snake didn't care who opened the box. You learned to test everything with sticks. Tap the box, prod the latch, shake the crate. But even then, it didn't always help. Sometimes shaking just angered the snake, so when the lid came off, it struck faster, harder, as if punishing you for the insult. There was no winning. Only slower ways to lose. And that was the point. Warfare here wasn't just about bullets and bombs. It was about dismantling your sense of safety piece by piece. If the ground could kill you, if the trees could kill you, if even a supply crate could kill you, then what part of the jungle was left to trust? Nothing. That's how the war was fought, not just with weapons, but with fear woven into every leaf, every shadow, every step. And the snake traps were just one more reminder. A reminder that in this place, even opening a box wasn't safe, that the jungle had 1,000 ways to bite, and you were running out of hands to swat it away. You've already learned that bamboo sharpened into spikes is bad enough on its own. Falling into a pit lined with pungy stakes can turn your leg into shredded meat in seconds. Getting skewered by a swinging log can break ribs, puncture lungs, and leave you writhing in the mud. But the jungle didn't stop at stabbing. The people who built these traps decided that stabbing wasn't cruel enough, wasn't effective enough. They wanted the wounds to linger. They wanted you to scream longer, suffer slower, rot from the inside out. And that's where the poison came in. It wasn't poison in the clean, Hollywood sense. No neat vial of glowing green liquid, no rare exotic venom. The poison was filth, human waste, animal dung, rotting meat, anything rancid and crawling with bacteria. The sharpened tips of bamboo stakes were smeared with this foul mixture, rubbed in until every microscopic crevice of the wood was saturated with infection. The spike didn't just pierce you, it injected the jungle's rot straight into your bloodstream. Picture the moment. You're exhausted, sweat-soaked, and stumbling forward on a narrow path. You've been trained to watch the ground, but all it takes is one mistake. One patch of dirt that looks solid but isn't. Your boot sinks, the cover gives way, and you drop into the pit. Spikes punch through your leg. The pain is white hot, tearing you apart, but the real damage hasn't even started yet. You're hauled out by your squad, bleeding, crying, shaking, but alive. For now. Hours later, the wound swells. The skin around the puncture turns red, then purple, then black. A fever burns through you like wildfire. Your body shakes uncontrollably, teeth chattering even though sweat pours down your face. The stench from the wound is unbearable, a mix of blood, pus, and the foul infection spreading deeper by the minute. Medics do what they can. Bandages, sulfur powder, maybe a shot of penicillin. But the jungle was stronger than their supplies. Antibiotics run out. Sterile tools don't exist here. You're fighting bacteria that thrive in this heat, in this humidity, in this filth. And the bacteria are winning. That was the point. The Viet Cong didn't just want to wound, they wanted to cripple. A dead soldier is one less rifle. A poisoned soldier is an anchor. He has to be carried, treated, protected. His screams give away positions. His weakness slows the entire squad. The infection spreads through the group like a curse, not because it jumps bodies, but because it robs everyone of energy, morale, and hope. One poison spike could break more than bones. It could break the will of an entire unit. The cruelty was deliberate. Soldiers who fell onto these spikes weren't just removed from battle, they were condemned to days of agony. Limbs swelled to grotesque sizes. Skin split open from pressure. Gangrene set in, flesh turning black and sloughing away while the stench filled the air. Sometimes the only option was amputation. Out came the bones sore. No anaesthesia, just morphine if you were lucky, and a medic praying he could cut fast enough to save you before shock killed you. Even then, infection could still spread. The jungle didn't care if you had one leg or two. It would finish the job anyway. And the psychological terror was worse. Men learned quickly what a poisoned wound looked like. The discoloration, the swelling, the smell. They'd seen it before and they knew what came next. Watching your friend writhe in the dirt, begging for relief, knowing that nothing short of a miracle could save him, that hollowed you out. It made every pit, every stake, every step forward 10 times more terrifying. Because you weren't just afraid of being stabbed, you were afraid of rotting alive. There were variations in the design too. Some spikes were angled so that they punctured deep into thighs and buttocks when soldiers fell into pits, ensuring wounds in areas that were harder to clean and treat. Others were deliberately placed at foot height, meant to drive filth-coated bamboo through boots into soles, leaving soldiers limping and useless. The enemy knew exactly how to maximize suffering. They weren't building traps to win a firefight. They were building traps to ruin you long after the firefight was over. And the jungle amplified it. Heat and humidity turned every wound septic faster. Flies swarmed open flesh, laying eggs that hatched into maggots wriggling in the tissue. Bandages soaked through within minutes, useless against the constant damp. Water was everywhere, but none of it was clean. Soldiers tried to wash wounds in streams, only to introduce new bacteria. The environment itself seemed determined to finish what the spike had started. Even the anticipation of poison was enough to break men down. You'd see a spike trap sprung. Maybe it missed. Maybe it just scraped someone's skin. And panic set in anyway. Was that tiny scratch enough? Did the spike break the skin? Would infection spread before morning? Fear of the unseen bacteria worked just as well as the real thing. It kept soldiers awake at night, staring at every cut, every blister, wondering if they'd wake up with a fever that meant the jungle had finally won. And it wasn't just soldiers who suffered. Civilians, too, stumbled into these traps. Farmers returning to their fields, children running along paths, villagers fleeing bombardments. None of them were spared. The spikes didn't care. Infection killed just as easily in bare feet as it did in combat boots. The war didn't stay at the front lines. It seeped into the daily lives of everyone forced to live among the traps. The effectiveness of these poisoned spikes wasn't just in the wounds they caused, but in the logistics they disrupted. Helicopter evacuations had to be called in. Stretchers had to be carried through swamps and under fire. Supplies were diverted to care for the wounded instead of being used for the healthy. Every poisoned soldier was a chain reaction of lost time, lost energy, lost momentum. The Viet Cong understood that better than anyone. They didn't need to outgun their enemy. They just needed to outlast him. And there was no defence. Boots helped a little, but not much. thick soles could be pierced by sharpened, hardened bamboo. Pants tucked into boots could slow some damage, but once you fell into a pit, nothing stopped the spikes from punching into thighs, torsos, arms. The only real defence was not falling at all, and in a jungle filled with traps, that was impossible. Sooner or later, someone slipped. And sooner or later, the poison did its work. The memory of it lingered long after. Veterans spoke of the smell of infected wounds, a smell so strong and foul it clung to their nostrils for decades. They remembered the screams of men begging to have limbs cut off just to escape the pain. They remembered the sight of skin splitting open, muscle liquefying, bones protruding. No battlefield hospital could erase those images. They were burned in forever, a permanent reminder that the jungle didn't just wound you, it devoured you slowly, piece by piece. And you kept walking, because what else could you do? You stepped forward, knowing that the next trap might not just stab you, it might poison you. It might leave you alive long enough to realise that sometimes living was worse than dying. The jungle floor is never just dirt. You already know that by now. It's been spikes, pits, mines and wires, all disguised under the same blanket of leaves and mud. But the cruelest trick the earth pulls is when it pretends to be solid. It lures you in with the promise of stability, then collapses under your weight, dropping you into something much worse. Camouflaged trapdoors. The pits weren't bad enough on their own. The enemy had to give them lids, so you wouldn't even see them until the moment you were being swallowed whole. These trapdoors were works of patience and deception. A shallow pit was dug first, usually 5 to 10 feet deep, just enough to catch a soldier completely. The bottom was lined with punji stakes, sharpened bamboo, sometimes hardened in fire, sometimes smeared with filth, sometimes mixed with metal scraps for good measure. Then came the lid. Thin bamboo slats, woven mats, branches, or even boards scavenged from bombed-out villages. The cover was layered with soil, leaves and grass until it looked exactly like the surrounding ground. From above, you couldn't tell the difference. Not in daylight, not with a flashlight. Not even if you were on your knees inspecting every inch. The jungle was already a visual mess of greens and browns. The trapdoor blended in perfectly, a hole disguised as nothing. And it didn't take much pressure to collapse. A single step, a single misplaced boot, and the cover gave way with a sickening snap. The illusion shattered, and suddenly you weren't walking forward anymore, you were falling. The fall wasn't long, but it didn't need to be. You dropped 5 feet, maybe 6, but gravity does its work. The cover slams shut above you as you crash down onto the stakes. They drive into legs, thighs, stomachs, groins. They pierce from below, angling upward, ensuring the wound isn't just a puncture, but a tear. Some pits were built with spikes angled inward, so that once you were inside, pulling yourself free only ripped you up worse. You didn't just fall into a hole. You fell into a cage of sharpened wood designed to keep you inside, and the panic made it worse. Instinct told you to thrash, to scramble, to claw your way out. But every movement just shoved the spikes deeper. Your rifle was useless, your pack weighed you down, and the walls of the pit were slick with mud. You couldn't climb out, you couldn't even stand. You were trapped, impaled, screaming in the dark while your squad above tried to figure out how to drag you free without making things worse. The sound of it stuck with you. The crack of the cover breaking, the hollow thud of a body hitting spikes, and then the immediate screaming. It wasn't like a gunshot wound, sharp and sudden. It was prolonged, guttural, agonised. A man fell into one of these pits and didn't just yell once. He howled for minutes, sometimes hours, while infection, blood loss and shock fought over which would kill him first. And sometimes the cover didn't just collapse neatly. Some trapdoors were designed to snap back into place once the victim was inside. The soldier fell, the lid flipped closed, and from above, the ground looked normal again. Except now, muffled screams came from beneath it. In the chaos of a patrol, in the cacophony of the jungle, it was easy to miss. Men vanished this way, swallowed by the earth, while their squad marched forward none the wiser. The variations were endless. Some trapdoors were built at the entrances of tunnels, dropping intruders straight into a pit of spikes before they even got inside. Others were set along narrow trails where soldiers had no room to manoeuvre, ensuring that once the first man fell, everyone else froze, too terrified to move. There were double-layered trapdoors, where the first gave way to a second, making it nearly impossible to escape without falling even deeper. And then there were water-filled pits, where soldiers fell not just onto spikes, but into stagnant pools of slime and filth, guaranteeing infection before they even climbed out. The cruelty was in how ordinary it all looked. Soldiers trained themselves to scan for wires, for disturbed dirt, for suspicious objects. But how do you scan for the ground itself? Every step was identical. Every patch of leaves was camouflage. You could probe the earth with a stick, sure, but you couldn't test every single square foot of jungle. Not when the patrol needed to move forward, not when exhaustion had already dulled your senses. And that's when the jungle struck. When you were too tired, too distracted, too human to notice the floor caving in. And even if you weren't the one who fell, the sight of it ruined you. Watching a friend vanish through the floor like the earth had eaten him alive, then hearing the shrieks from below, it broke something inside you. You couldn't unsee it. You couldn't forget the way the lid had looked so solid, the way it betrayed you without warning. From that moment on, every step forward felt like a gamble you couldn't win. Rescue was its own nightmare. Getting a man out of one of these pits was messy, dangerous and slow. The spikes weren't designed to release him easily. They hooked, angled, tore deeper with every attempt to move. Hauling him out meant tearing him apart even worse. Medics worked frantically, but their tools were useless against the mud, the filth, the rot already crawling into the wounds. Morphine dulled the pain, but it didn't stop the infection. Amputation was sometimes the only option, performed right there in the field, saws cutting through bone, while flies buzzed overhead. And for what? The soldier wouldn't return to duty. He wouldn't finish the patrol. His war was over, not with a bang, but with a drop into the earth disguised as safety. The pit didn't need to kill him outright. It just needed to remove him, to burden his squad, to sap their strength and their spirit. That was the genius behind it. Cheap, simple, devastatingly effective. The paranoia spread like wildfire. You stopped trusting the ground. Not just the obvious paths, but everything. Even the places you thought were safe. Clearings, roads, village yards could hide trapdoors. Soldiers started tapping every step with sticks, crawling forward on hands and knees, terrified of being swallowed whole. Patrols slowed to a crawl, drained by fear long before the enemy ever fired a shot, and the jungle never ran out of patience. Trapdoors could sit untouched for weeks, months, waiting for the unlucky foot to press down. Rain disguised them even better, washing fresh soil over the covers, smoothing them until they were indistinguishable from the real thing. You could march 12 times down the same trail without incident, only for the 13th to claim you. There was no pattern, no safety, just luck. And eventually, luck always ran out. Even after the war, the memory of these pits haunted men. Stepping onto a creaky floorboard back home, hearing it groan underfoot, was enough to send them spiralling back into the jungle, heart racing, sweat pouring. The earth itself had been turned into a predator, and that's not something you forget. And you kept walking because there was no choice. The jungle didn't give you breaks. The trapdoors were waiting, and so were the spikes beneath them. Every step forward was another chance to be swallowed whole, another chance for the ground to remind you that in this war, nothing, not even the floor beneath your boots, was ever on your side. By now, you're already terrified of the ground, the trees, the doors, the pits, and even the boxes that are supposed to hold supplies. But the jungle still has another gift for you, and it comes in the form of something small, simple, and familiar. Grenades. You'd think a grenade would be dangerous enough when thrown. Pull the pin, toss it, watch the explosion. Straightforward. But here, grenades aren't weapons in your hands. They're tied to everything around you, turned into invisible assassins by thin strands of wire, twine, or vine. Grenades were cheap, plentiful, and easy to modify. A little creativity and a bit of patience could turn one into the most versatile booby trap imaginable. Tie it to a door, tie it to a tree, tie it to a log, a root, a water jug, a radio, a canteen, a tripwire stretched across the trail. Anything you could touch, open, or walk past could have a grenade tied to it. And when you pulled, pushed, or even brushed against it, you didn't just trigger a trap. You detonated the most recognizable explosion in the entire war. Picture it. You're moving down a narrow path, sweating through your uniform, eyes darting everywhere, nerves shot. You're trying to keep your boots on the same spot as the man in front of you. You're praying you don't stumble into a pit or wire. Then you brush against something at shin level. There's a tiny tug, a sharp sound, a metallic click. The pin pops free and the fuse starts burning. You get maybe 4 seconds. 4 seconds to realise you've just armed a grenade tied to the jungle itself. And in that moment, 4 seconds is both an eternity and nothing at all. You scream, you dive, you hit the dirt and pray. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. The grenade goes off, deafening you with a blast that rips through leaves, mud and flesh. Shrapnel slices through the air, tearing into legs, backs, arms, wherever it lands. The explosion isn't clean. It doesn't kill neatly. It mangles, it blinds, it shreds. The lucky ones die outright. The unlucky ones are left screaming, limbs missing, eyes gone, begging for help that won't come fast enough. And grenades weren't just tied to trails. They were tied to everything. You kicked open a hut door. A grenade swung down like a pendulum from the rafters. You lifted the lid of a supply crate. A grenade inside blew your hands off. You picked up a seemingly abandoned rifle leaning against a tree. A grenade tied to the stock tore you apart. Even latrines weren't safe. Men squatted down to relieve themselves, only to set off grenades tied to the flimsy bamboo walls. The enemy weaponized your most basic needs, turning relief into mutilation. The versatility was endless. Grenades were wired to buckets of fuel, creating instant firestorms. They were tied to tripwires across jungle streams, so the moment you stepped in for a drink, You detonated yourself. They were planted in helmet, boots, and even corpses left behind as bait. A body lying in the dirt could be rigged with a grenade underneath, waiting for someone with enough humanity to try and move it. The act of compassion became the trigger for another explosion, and the paranoia spread like wildfire. Soldiers learned not to trust anything. Not doors, not boxes, not even their own curiosity. A shiny object lying in the dirt? Leave it. A crate of supplies? Don't touch it. A weapon lying abandoned? Forget it. Everything could be tied to a grenade. The jungle became a museum of suspicion, where every item was a potential executioner. You didn't just fear the enemy, you feared the world around you. The sound of a grenade trap going off was different from a landmine. Landmine boomed, deep and muffled, shaking the earth. Grenades snapped, sharp and violent, a sudden crack that tore through the air and left ears ringing. The blast radius wasn't as wide as a mine, but in the tight confines of jungle paths and huts, it didn't need to be. The explosion was more than enough to shred the man who triggered it and injure everyone close by. And then there was the unpredictability. A grenade's fuse wasn't always reliable. Sometimes it went off instantly. Sometimes it sputtered for a few seconds, hissing like a snake, giving everyone just enough time to panic before it exploded. Sometimes it failed completely, leaving a live grenade sitting in the dirt, a silent question mark daring someone to move it. That uncertainty was a weapon in itself. Even if nothing exploded, you were left sweating, frozen, waiting for a detonation that might still come. The cruelty wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Soldiers began to hesitate before touching anything. They avoided doors, crates, even canteens left behind. Every delay slowed patrols, drained morale, and fed the constant hum of paranoia that kept men awake at night. And that was the point. A grenade tied to nothing more than a bit of twine could stop a squad in its tracks, force them to crawl forward inch by inch, scanning every branch, every vine, every shadow. And then there were the chain reactions. Some traps were designed with multiple grenades wired together, so that triggering one set off several more in sequence. The jungle lit up with explosions, shrapnel spraying in every direction, chaos swallowing the patrol before they had time to think. Survivors dove into the mud, ears ringing, lungs heaving, hearts pounding, waiting for the next explosion that might or might not come. Even when engineers came in to clear traps, grenades weren't easy to neutralize. Wires were hidden under mud, tangled in vines, wrapped around branches. Cutting the wrong one set off the charge instantly. It took time, patience, and steady hands to disarm them. And in the middle of a sweltering jungle with enemy eyes watching, time and patience weren't luxuries you had. And the aftermath of a grenade wound was its own special kind of horror. Shrapnel didn't just slice clean lines, it ripped jagged holes through muscle, tore tendons, shattered bone. Bits of metal embedded deep, too small to remove, left inside the body to fester. Men lived with fragments rattling around in them for the rest of their lives, constant reminders of the jungle's cruelty. And the injuries weren't just physical. The blast left men deaf, concussed, permanently shaken. Their ears rang for weeks, their hands trembled, their minds replayed the explosion every time a twig snapped underfoot. Grenades tied to everything turned the act of living into a gamble. You couldn't drink water, open a door, pick up supplies, or even walk down a trail without wondering if you were about to explode. The jungle was already suffocating, already hot, already miserable. Add in the knowledge that even curiosity or necessity could kill you, and it became unbearable. And the genius of it all? It cost nothing. A grenade, some wire, and a few minutes of time. That was it. The United States spent millions on firepower, on bombs, on air support. The Viet Cong spent pocket change and created a nightmare far worse than anything dropped from the sky. You weren't fighting soldiers anymore. You were fighting grenades tied to the world around you, each one waiting for you to make the mistake of being alive. And when you realised that, when you understood that every object in the jungle could be a trigger, the paranoia sank so deep you never shook it off. Never. Even back home, years later, men found themselves hesitating before opening a closet door, before picking up a box, before stepping onto a porch. The war followed them everywhere, not in gunfire or bombs, but in the quiet suspicion that something ordinary might still explode. And as if the grenades weren't enough, the jungle wasn't finished. Because if everything you touch could kill you, then the next step was obvious. Even the spaces you couldn't see, the tunnels, the hidden chambers beneath the ground, were waiting to do the same. By now, you're already convinced that the jungle itself is alive and hates you. The trees drop logs on your head, the dirt collapses beneath you. The vines tug grenades, and even the boxes you're supposed to open hiss venom into your face. But there's a place worse than all of that. A place where the traps aren't just above ground, they're below it. Hidden in a labyrinth so complex, it makes your own brain feel small. Welcome to the tunnels. On the surface, the jungle is already unbearable, but the tunnels underneath are something else entirely. Built by hand, dug with shovels, baskets and patience, they stretched for miles beneath villages, fields and forests. They weren't random holes in the ground. They were networks, entire underground cities, sleeping chambers, kitchens, hospitals, storage rooms, and most importantly, fighting positions. These tunnels weren't primitive. They were smarter than you. Crawl down into one and the air changes instantly. The humidity thickens, the oxygen thins, and the smell slams into you. Damp earth, mildew, sweat, and human waste all crammed together in a suffocating cocktail. The walls close in, barely wide enough for your shoulders, forcing you to hunch or crawl. Your helmet scrapes, your rifle catches, your knees sink into wet soil. Every movement is loud. Every breath echoes. And you know without a doubt that you don't belong here. The enemy does. The Viet Cong knew these tunnels like the backs of their hands. They moved through them silently, quickly, confidently, disappearing into hidden trapdoors you couldn't even find if you were standing right on top of them. And the tunnels weren't just hiding places. They were weapons. Every few feet could be a trap. A concealed pit lined with spikes, just waiting for your hand or knee. A pressure plate buried in the dirt, rigged to a grenade or a mine. A false wall hiding a shooter ready to put a bullet in your face the second you crawled past. The tunnels weren't passive defences. They were active mazes designed to bleed you the moment you entered. Picture yourself crawling forward, rifle awkward in your hands. Flashlight beam barely cutting through the thick darkness. The ceiling presses down, the walls scrape your arms, and the dirt crumbles under your weight. You're already gasping, your lungs begging for air that isn't there. Sweat pours into your eyes, stings blind you. And then your hand brushes something thin and taut across the floor. A wire. You freeze. Too late. The explosion fills the tunnel. deafening, blinding, collapsing soil all around you. You're crushed, burned, suffocating before you even realise what went wrong. And that's if you're lucky. Some traps weren't designed to kill outright. They were designed to maim or trap. Spikes at ankle height to cripple you. Nets weighted with dirt to pin you in place. Poisoned stakes planted at corners so sharp turns turned into punctured thighs. You couldn't crawl more than a few feet without the paranoia gnawing at your brain. Was the floor safe? Was the wall real? Was the ceiling about to collapse? Every inch forward was a gamble. Claustrophobia made it worse. Above ground, at least you had space, air, sky. Down here the walls pressed in like coffins. You couldn't turn around quickly. You couldn't sprint away. Once you crawled in, you were committed. If something went wrong, and it usually did, you didn't escape. You suffocated, buried alive in mud and darkness. Your body never recovered. The tunnels didn't just swallow you, they kept you. And while you were crawling blindly, the enemy was already moving behind you. These tunnels had multiple levels, hidden doors, and false exits. You could be halfway through one when suddenly someone popped out of a side passage you didn't even know existed. A shot rang out, the flash blinding in the dark, and then silence again. You weren't just trapped in the earth. You were trapped in someone else's home field, and they knew every corner. Even when you weren't inside, the tunnels haunted you. Villages that looked empty weren't. Fields that looked quiet weren't. The enemy could vanish in seconds, slipping underground and reappearing miles away. Airstrikes, artillery, napalm, it didn't matter. The tunnels absorbed it all, hid their builders, and let them wait until you passed by, exhausted and distracted. Then the ambush came, and by the time you reacted, they were gone again, back underground, into the maze you couldn't touch. The psychological toll was enormous. Soldiers sent into these tunnels, nicknamed tunnel rats, knew exactly what they were signing up for. A flashlight, a pistol, maybe a knife, and their own fraying nerves. They crawled in alone or in pairs, knowing that every corner could be their last. Some didn't come back. Some came back broken, eyes wide, hands shaking, unable to ever crawl into a small space again. The tunnels weren't just smarter than you, they broke you. And the cruelty of the design wasn't accidental. Some passages were deliberately made narrow, forcing invaders to strip gear, helmets, even rifles just to fit. Imagine squeezing through a hole barely wider than your chest, weapon left behind, body pressed into damp soil, heartbeat pounding in your ears. And then, halfway through, the dirt shifts, the ceiling groans. You wonder if this is the moment it collapses and buries you alive. You keep moving because you have no choice, but every crawl forward feels like signing your own death sentence. Then there were the airless chambers. Rooms with barely any oxygen, where just standing for a few minutes left you dizzy, light-headed, gasping. The enemy could fight here because they were used to it. You weren't. Your lungs burned, your vision blurred, your hands shook. The air itself turned against you, a weapon you couldn't see but could feel, tearing you apart from the inside. And sometimes the tunnels weren't just defences, they were bait. An entrance left slightly exposed, just visible enough to tempt you. You crawled in, desperate to flush out the enemy, only to find it rigged with explosives, the walls lined with spikes, the exit sealed. You were funneled straight into your own grave, and the jungle covered it back up without a trace. Even above ground, the tunnels mocked you. You bombed a village flat, only for fighters to emerge hours later from holes in the earth, rifles blazing. You burned the jungle, only for them to vanish underground, safe in chambers carved from the soil. It felt less like fighting men, and more like fighting ghosts, shadows that never stayed still, phantoms that melted into the dirt whenever you reached for them. And the paranoia followed you home. Years later, veterans avoided basements, closets, crawl spaces. The memory of squeezing through dark tunnels, of dirt pressing in on all sides, of wires brushing against skin, it never left. The tunnels weren't just structures. They were psychological scars, carved deep and permanent. And while you were busy being suffocated, stabbed and disoriented underground, the jungle above didn't pause. It had more traps waiting, more wires, more spikes, more reminders that no matter where you went, up, down, or sideways, the war had already dug in deeper than you ever could. By the time you've marched a few weeks through this jungle, the real enemy isn't just the traps. It's what the traps do to your head. The bamboo, the pits, the wires, the grenades. They don't just tear apart your flesh. They tear apart your nerves. They strip your mind down until every step forward feels like a test you're destined to fail. That's the toll. Walking blind, knowing death is wired into the earth, makes you a husk long before a bullet or a blade ever finds you. Imagine this. It's morning, but there's no sunrise worth seeing. The jungle canopy swallows the light, leaving you in a permanent twilight that feels the same at noon as it does at dusk. You wake already tired, body sticky, uniform damp, boots swollen with yesterday's mud. Your eyes sting from the sweat that never stops dripping. Your stomach churns from rations that taste like cardboard and regret. And then you remember, you have to walk again. Miles of jungle, miles of traps, miles of guessing which patch of dirt is lying to you. You move forward anyway, rifle clutched tight, pack dragging your shoulders down. The jungle soundtrack plays on repeat. Cicadas screaming in your ears, frogs croaking like broken machinery, mosquitoes whining with the persistence of a dentist drill. Drip, drip, drip. Water falls from leaves onto your helmet, your neck, the back of your rifle. You can't tune it out anymore. Every sound blends with the paranoia, until your brain can't tell the difference between a twig snapping naturally and a tripwire snapping taut. Every vine looks like a wire. Every log looks like a cover for a pit. Every clearing looks like bait. You don't just walk, you shuffle, testing each step with a stick, watching the ground so hard that your eyes blur. Your boots squelch in mud, and each time they sink, you brace for the spike you're sure is waiting underneath. Your legs ache, your back screams, your heart pounds, and still you keep inching forward. The jungle doesn't let you stop. And here's the part that eats at you most. You never know if you're safe. You can't see the traps until they have already sprung. You can't smell them, can't hear them. They're invisible until the moment they ruin you. Walking becomes a gamble where the odds are stacked and the house never loses. You tell yourself you'll be careful, that you'll keep your eyes sharp. But the jungle is patient. It doesn't need you to be careless every step. It just needs one wrong boot, one distracted glance, one slip of attention, and the ground decides you're finished. The fear gets into your body. Your muscles clench, your jaw tightens, your shoulders lock. Hours of that tension grind you down until you're sore everywhere, even in places that aren't moving. You start shaking. Not because of the cold, but because your nerves are cooked. Your hands tremble when you reload. Your voice cracks when you whisper. Your knees wobble every time you climb a slope. You're not just tired, you're unravelling, and it's contagious. Fear spreads through the squad like smoke. One man freezes on the path, staring at a vine he swears is a wire. The others stop, hearts pounding, eyes scanning. Minutes pass before anyone moves. Another man insists the ground looks wrong, that it's too flat, too smooth, too suspicious. You wait, prodding at the dirt with sticks, sweating in silence. Every delay stretches into eternity. Hours vanish to paranoia, and the jungle eats the day without firing a shot. It gets worse at night. Darkness turns the paranoia into madness. Flashlights barely cut through the black, and every beam reflects off leaves and eyes you can't identify. Sleep doesn't come easy, and when it does, it's broken by nightmares. You see pits opening beneath you, hear grenades snap in pins, feel snakes sliding over your chest. You wake gasping, drenched in sweat, clutching your rifle like it's the only thing keeping you alive. And then you realise you have to walk again in a few hours. The constant fear rewires you. You stop trusting anything. Food, water, huts, crates, paths, all of it could be hiding a trap. You stop trusting yourself. Was that patch of dirt really disturbed? Or are your eyes lying? Was that twig just a twig? Or the sound of a tripwire snapping? You stop trusting your squad mates. The point man missed the last wire. What if he misses the next one? The man behind you stepped too close. What if he sets something off that takes you both? The jungle isolates you, even when you're surrounded. It convinces you that you're alone, walking blind into something you can't avoid. And the body keeps score. Your stomach knots constantly, cramps twisting through your gut. Your head pounds from dehydration, exhaustion, and the unrelenting noise. Your skin itches from bites, burns from infections, stings from plants. You can't tell if the sweat on your back is your own, or if it's blood seeping through from a cut you didn't notice. Every nerve is raw. Every sensation is magnified. You don't just walk through the jungle, you endure it. And endurance is another word for suffering stretched out over time. Some men break quickly. They stumble into traps because their brains are too fried to focus anymore. Others break slowly. They stop talking, stop eating, stop reacting. They just march, eyes blank, waiting for the jungle to swallow them. That's the toll. The traps don't need to kill everyone. They just need to hollow you out until you're nothing but a body walking forward, blind and broken. Even the silence becomes a weapon. You're used to the noise, the bugs, the frogs, the birds, but sometimes it all stops. The jungle goes quiet, and your stomach twists because you know that means something. Maybe an ambush, maybe just another trap waiting ahead. The silence presses down heavier than the noise ever did. It squeezes your chest, speeds your pulse, makes every footstep sound like a gunshot in your ears. You want to stop, but you can't. Stopping feels worse. So you keep walking blind, one step at a time, into whatever waits. And then it happens again. Someone steps wrong. A pit opens, a wire snaps, an explosion rips through the air. The screams that follow aren't just from the wounded, they're from everyone else too. Because every trap that catches one man reinforces what you already know. It could have been you. It should have been you. Next time, it will be you. That thought doesn't leave. It sits in your head like a spike of its own, permanent, unshakable. The toll follows you even when you're out of the jungle. Back home, sidewalks and driveways feel suspicious. A creak in the floor makes your heart race. A snapping twig in the woods sends you diving for cover. Your brain never leaves Vietnam. It keeps walking blind, scanning for traps that aren't there, waiting for the ground to betray you again. You survived the jungle, but the jungle didn't leave you. And you keep walking because there's no other option. The war doesn't let you stop. The jungle doesn't forgive hesitation. You walk forward blind, nerves shredded, mind hollowed out, body screaming. You don't see the traps, but you feel them everywhere. And the worst part is knowing that eventually one of them will win. By now, you've already learned that the jungle doesn't need much to kill you. A pit, a stick, a piece of sharpened bamboo smeared with filth. That's enough to ruin you forever. But the enemy wasn't satisfied with sticks. They had a knack for taking whatever scraps were lying around. Bits of metal, dud bombs, food cans, even garbage, and turning them into improvised explosives. Things you'd never suspect until they went off in your face. Because when the jungle itself is a weapon, anything lying in it is fair game. Improvised explosives weren't new in concept, but the Viet Cong perfected them in ways that turned ordinary junk into nightmares. Unexploded American ordnance was everywhere. Bombs dropped from planes didn't always detonate. Artillery shells buried into the earth without exploding. Mortars fizzled out. Instead of being useless, these duds were gold mines. Dug up, cracked open, stripped for powder and fuses, they became the raw ingredients for fresh traps. The irony was heavy. American weapons were recycled to kill American soldiers. You weren't just fighting the enemy. You were fighting your own arsenal, repurposed by hands that knew how to squeeze every ounce of terror out of it. Picture it. You're patrolling through a swampy patch of jungle, boots sucking into the muck with every step. Ahead, you see a rusty tin can half buried in the mud. Looks harmless. Probably trash left behind from some old rations. Maybe even your side's trash from weeks ago. But that can isn't garbage. It's a bomb. Packed tight with salvaged explosive powder, nails and rocks, rigged with a tripwire across the path. The moment your shin brushes the wire, the can goes off. Not big enough to flatten you instantly, but just right to send a storm of jagged metal into your legs and stomach. Enough to leave you bleeding, screaming and useless. And cans were just the start. Bottles were filled with shrapnel and powder. Grenade casings were cracked open, their parts scattered into multiple small bombs. Even bamboo itself was hollowed, stuffed with explosives, and wired into crude but effective mines. You couldn't trust anything. A stick on the ground could be a detonator. A lump of dirt could be a disguised shell. Every piece of debris became suspicious. Every shadow another possibility that the enemy had turned the ordinary into something lethal. Some traps weren't even meant to explode big. They were meant to explode small, just enough to wound. That's because a wounded soldier costs more than a dead one. A small IED might only blow off a foot or a hand, but that meant the entire squad had to stop, treat the wound, carry the man, and call for evacuation. Progress slowed. Morale plummeted. The jungle smiled. The cruelty was in how unpredictable they were. A pressure plate under a patch of soil might trigger an artillery shell big enough to take out a truck. A grenade wired to a water jug might blow up the moment you tried to quench your thirst. A cluster of soda cans tied together with fuses might turn an ordinary path into a firestorm of metal shards. the jungle became less about avoiding obvious traps and more about avoiding anything at all. You learned to fear the ordinary, because the ordinary wasn't ordinary anymore. The sound of these improvised bombs going off was unmistakable. Not the deep thunder of a landmine, not the sharp snap of a grenade. It was rougher, dirtier. A blast that came with a hiss and a roar, as if the jungle itself had coughed up fire. The explosion tore through silence, threw mud and leaves into the air, and left bodies twitching in its wake. And then, just as quickly, the jungle went back to its normal soundtrack. Cicadas screaming, frogs croaking, water dripping, as if nothing had happened. And when the bombs didn't go off right away, they worked just as well. A soldier spots a can, pokes at it with a stick, and the thing fizzles but doesn't explode. Now you're stuck, staring at a live bomb that might blow at any second. You don't want to touch it, don't want to leave it, don't want to walk past it. Hours are wasted while engineers come in to deal with it, sweating as they clip wires and disarm what might be nothing more than a dud. The jungle doesn't care. Time wasted is still victory. Improvised explosives also meant there was no consistency. You could study manuals, learn the mechanisms of mines and grenades, train to recognise wires and triggers. But what do you do when the bomb is made from an old soup can, wired with fishing line, and buried under mud? What do you do when it's disguised as a toy left on the path, or as a helmet abandoned in the brush? There was no guidebook for that. You just learned the hard way, and learning usually meant watching someone else lose a limb. And sometimes these devices weren't just hidden. They were planted in places designed to lure you. A radio left sitting in a hut, a pack of rations in the corner of a trench, a pile of ammunition stacked neatly by the roadside. You reach for it, thinking you'd scored, only for the entire pile to detonate. The enemy knew curiosity and desperation were weapons too. Soldiers hungry, thirsty, or greedy made easy prey. The psychological toll was enormous. You stopped trusting not just the jungle, but yourself. You stopped touching things. You stopped looking for anything useful. You stopped feeling relief when you found supplies, because supplies were bait now. You couldn't drink from a canteen you didn't carry yourself. You couldn't pick up ammo you didn't load yourself. The war stripped you of trust in the very objects that were supposed to keep you alive. And civilians didn't escape it either. Improvised explosives were scattered across villages, fields and paths. Children picked up cans and toys only to vanish in a blast. Farmers stumbled onto shells buried in their fields. Families cooking over stoves found themselves igniting bombs hidden in firewood. The cruelty didn't stop with soldiers. It spread into every life that touched the ground. Even after the war, the problem remained. Unexploded ordnance still sat buried, waiting. Farmers, decades later, ploughed into bombs that had been sleeping under the soil since the 1960s. Children playing in fields still picked up metal that exploded in their hands. The war ended, but the improvisation had left scars that lasted generations. And while you were busy fearing cans, bottles and helmets, the jungle still had more waiting. Because if the ground could kill you, and the ordinary could kill you, then even the skies and swamps were still waiting for their turn. Helicopters were supposed to be your lifeline. They were the buzzing metal angels that dropped you in, yanked you out, and made you believe, even for a second, that the jungle couldn't keep you forever. You'd hear the thump, thump, thump of rotors, and think, safety, airlift, rescue. But in Vietnam, the ground never let you off that easy. Even the act of landing a helicopter, touching down for reinforcements or evacuation, turned into chaos. Because the enemy knew exactly where those birds would land, and they seeded the earth around those clearings with mines, wires, and traps. What should have been salvation became another ambush, with blades cutting the air overhead. Picture the scene. You're pinned down in the jungle, squads scattered, bullets maybe still echoing from a firefight, or maybe just paranoia convincing you the tree line is alive. The call goes in for dust-off. Minutes stretch like hours until you finally hear it. Rotors in the distance, chopping closer, louder, the air itself shaking as the machine descends. Relief washes over you, but it's not pure, because you know what comes next. The helicopter has to land, and the moment those skids touch Earth, the ground might erupt. Landing zones were obvious targets. To get a helicopter in, you needed a patch of open ground, a clearing, a field, a flattened stretch of rice paddy. The kind of places the enemy had been watching, waiting, booby-trapping, mines buried just under the mud, grenades tied to tripwires stretched across the edges, even artillery shells wired to pressure plates. The chopper might hit one the instant it touched down, or the men sprinting toward it might. Either way, the jungle got its blood before anyone left. The chaos was indescribable. Dust whipped up by the rotor wash blinded everyone. Leaves, dirt, and grit turned the air into a storm, stinging your eyes, choking your throat. The noise drowned out everything. Commands, screams, even gunfire. You ran half blind, half deaf. Boots pounding the ground you knew wasn't safe. Every step might trigger a mine. Every second was borrowed time. And then, inevitably, the blast came. Sometimes it was the helicopter itself that hit it. A buried charge detonated under a skid, flipping the birds sideways, blades chopping into trees, sparks and fire filling the air. The men inside were shredded before they ever got out. Sometimes it was the soldiers sprinting toward it, the lead man's boot catching a wire hidden in the grass, a grenade yanked free, the explosion ripping through the squad before they even reached the doors. Screams and smoke filled the landing zone, the rescue turning into a massacre in seconds. And the cruel part? The Viet Cong didn't even need to fight you in those moments. The traps did all the work. They could plant explosives days or weeks ahead of time, walk away, and let the helicopter pilots deliver soldiers right onto them. It wasn't just efficient, it was humiliating. You thought you were escaping, rising above the jungle, leaving the nightmare behind. Instead, the jungle reached up and reminded you that even the air couldn't save you. Variations kept you guessing. Some mines weren't even aimed at the helicopters. They were aimed at the men forming perimeter security, the ones fanning out to protect the landing zone. A tripwire stretch just inside the tree line caught the first man who stepped too far, detonating a grenade that sprayed shrapnel through the group. Others were set in likely approach routes, knowing soldiers would cut paths or stomp down grass to clear space. What looked like a safe landing zone was often nothing more than a stage rigged to explode the moment the play began. And then there was the sheer panic of it all. Helicopter landings were frantic even on safe ground. You had seconds to get men in or out, to load the wounded, to dump supplies. Add mines into the mix, and seconds stretched into forever. Men froze, too terrified to run forward. Others sprinted blindly, tripping wires, detonating charges that shredded everyone nearby. The noise of explosions mixed with rotor blades, making it impossible to know where the next danger was. Chaos layered on chaos. until the landing zone looked less like rescue and more like a slaughterhouse. The fear followed you into every future landing. The sound of approaching rotors, once a lifeline, became another trigger for dread. You'd crouch in the grass, weapon ready, scanning the ground frantically while the helicopter descended. Was that patch of dirt too smooth? Was that clump of grass hiding a wire? Was that shadow just a shadow? Or the edge of a buried shell? You couldn't know. You just prayed that this landing would be clean, that the earth wouldn't explode beneath your boots again, and the paranoia spread into everyday movement. Any clearing could be a landing zone, which meant any clearing could be mined. Even when you weren't waiting for helicopters, you treated open ground like it was radioactive. You stuck to cover, avoided flat spaces, distrusted every patch of open earth. The jungle herded you into its thickets, funneled you into its traps, made you fear the very spaces that should have felt like relief. The aftermath of these ambushes was brutal. Helicopters burning, men writhing in the dirt, screams drowned by rotor wash. Medics worked frantically in chaos, dragging the wounded into the bird while explosions still echoed. Blood spattered the skids, the doors, the floor inside. Sometimes the bird managed to lift off anyway, wobbling into the air under fire. Other times it never left, collapsing in flames while the jungle closed in around it. And you had to keep moving, because staying meant death too. The landing zone could be hit with mortars or machine gun fire the moment the traps did their work. What was supposed to be safety became another battle in seconds, and you were left crawling through smoke, choking on dust, tripping over bodies just to get back into the trees you thought you hated. Helicopter landings summed up the war perfectly. Even the things that were supposed to save you betrayed you. Even the sky wasn't clean. The enemy didn't just fight you with bullets. They fought you with your own hope, turning every rescue into another nightmare. And while you wiped dust from your burning eyes, ears still ringing, lungs still choking, you knew it wasn't over. Because the jungle wasn't done reminding you that no matter how far you thought you'd escaped, there was always another trap waiting just past the next step. The jungle never gave you much to work with, but at least water should have been simple. You drank it, you crossed it, you slogged through it. You already had enough misery from dehydration, heat and sweat. Water was supposed to be a relief, however filthy or mosquito infested it was. But here, even the water hated you. Rivers, streams, rice paddies, swamps, none of them were safe. If the ground could swallow you, the trees could smash you, and the air could poison you, then the water was just another mouth waiting to drown or skewer you. Crossings were unavoidable. The jungle was laced with streams that looked shallow until you stepped in and sank to your knees. Rice paddies stretched out in flooded grids, sucking at your boots with every step. Swamps oozed into every low place, turning trails into brown sludge. You were forced to wade, forced to slog, forced to trust the murky liquid hiding everything beneath its surface. And the enemy knew that. They knew you couldn't avoid water, so they turned it into one giant trap. Punji stakes were the favourite. Bamboo sharpened into spears, driven into the riverbed or the swamp bottom, angled upward to catch feet, shins and thighs. The water hid them perfectly. From above, all you saw was muddy ripples. Step in, and the spikes drove straight through your boot, straight through your flesh, coated in the same filth that guaranteed infection. You didn't just limp out of the stream. You screamed your way out, bleeding into the water, carried by your squad while the swamp laughed. And the spikes weren't always stationary. Some were set in bundles, lashed together, weighted just enough to float slightly beneath the surface. They shifted with the current, invisible until they pressed into your legs. Others were hinged, springing upward when disturbed, driving into your groin or stomach before you even knew what you'd hit. The water gave them cover, movement, surprise. It wasn't just a swamp. It was a minefield made of wood. The worst were the pits. Holes dug under shallow water, lined with spikes, disguised so well that you didn't even realise you were stepping into one until you were falling. Your body plunged into murky brown liquid, arms flailing, lungs gasping, and then the stakes hit. They punched into your torso, your thighs, your arms, pinning you underwater. You thrashed, swallowing filthy water, blood clouding around you, while your squad tried to drag you out without impaling themselves too. The trap didn't just wound you, it drowned you. And even when you weren't stabbed, the water worked against you. Minds were buried in the mud, pressure plates that detonated when your weight pressed down through the liquid. The explosion didn't just shred you, it threw a geyser of muck, water, and body parts into the air, showering everyone nearby. The swamp swallowed blood and dirt back down, leaving nothing but bubbles and silence, as if it hadn't just eaten someone alive. The paranoia was relentless. You stopped trusting water the same way you stopped trusting dirt and doors. Every stream crossing turned into a ritual of probing with sticks, testing each step before you placed your weight. You inched forward, boots sucking, rifles raised awkwardly above your heads, eyes darting across the rippling surface for signs of something hidden. Every movement made noise, splashes echoing through the trees, and you knew the enemy could be watching, waiting to add bullets to the misery. The psychological weight was heavy. You couldn't even drink without fear. Canteens ran dry fast, and sometimes the only choice was to refill from the same streams you waded through. But what if a can floated nearby? What if a bundle of bamboo sat under the surface? Even lowering yourself to scoop water felt like playing with death. And when you did drink, the water itself betrayed you. Parasites, bacteria, diseases that left you vomiting, feverish, weak. It wasn't just the spikes that poisoned you. The swamp itself seeped into your body and rotted you from the inside out. And the smell, that stench of stagnant swamp water, a mix of rotting vegetation, mud, and human waste. It clung to your skin, your uniform, your rifle. Every time you waded, it soaked into you, refusing to wash away. Add blood to it, and it became unbearable, a rank perfume of death that followed you for miles. Even the rice paddies, which looked harmless, were death traps. Farmers had tended them for generations, but during the war, they became killing fields. Mines planted in the mud, stakes hidden underwater, explosives tied to the levees. Soldiers slogged through, water up to their thighs, rifles clutched high, knowing that at any second the paddy could erupt. And when it did, the water carried blood in wide ripples, turning the crops into floating reminders of how little safety existed here. And sometimes the traps weren't even built, they were just placed. Snakes in baskets dropped into streams, writhing in the water until a soldier brushed against them. Containers of fuel rigged to ignite, setting swamp water on fire. Yes, fire on water, because the jungle had no limits. 1 second you were wading chest deep, the next the surface was burning, flames licking across liquid, smoke choking your lungs while you scrambled blindly. spikes and mud waiting below. Crossings became nightmares, repeated again and again. Men froze at the banks, staring into the rippling water like it was alive. Some refused to move until engineers prodded every inch. Others stepped in anyway, too exhausted to care, accepting that if it was their turn, then so be it. The swamp didn't care about exhaustion. The swamp just waited, and the memory stuck forever. Veterans couldn't walk through creeks back home without flinching, couldn't swim in lakes without imagining spikes waiting at the bottom, couldn't see muddy water without smelling the rot, the blood, the burning fuel. The jungle left scars not just on the body, but on every thought of water afterward. And you still had to keep wading, because there was no choice. The jungle's rivers and swamps weren't optional. They were part of the path, part of the war, part of the endless grind. You stepped forward blind, boots sucking into the muck, hoping the water wouldn't decide to swallow you, stab you, or explode under you, and all the while, the trees and vines around you whispered that it wasn't finished yet. The jungle was already stacked against you. The ground stabbed, the trees swung, the wires snapped, the rivers drowned, and the sky rained chaos. But even if you somehow survived all of that, even if the trap didn't kill you outright, even if your squad pulled you out screaming, you still weren't safe. Because medical help was never enough. Out here, a wound wasn't just a wound. It was a slow-motion death sentence, dressed up with morphine and bandages. On paper, you had medics. Brave men who carried packs full of gauze, tourniquets, morphine, and a few vials of antibiotics. In training, that seemed like a safety net. In the movies, the medic shows up, patches you up, and you live to fight another day. In reality, the jungle laughed at that fantasy, because nothing in that medic's pack was enough to counter what the traps did to you. Picture the scene. A man falls into a punji pit. Spikes tear through his leg, coated in human waste. His squad drags him out screaming, blood pouring, skin already swelling. The medic rushes in, rips open his pack, and does what he can. He pours sulphur powder, wraps the wound tight, injects morphine. For a moment, the bleeding slows, the pain dulls, the soldier breathes easier. But the jungle isn't finished. The infection starts within hours. Fever spiking, skin turning purple, pus oozing through the bandages. The medic can't stop it. The antibiotics aren't strong enough. The supplies aren't clean enough. And the jungle is endless in its bacteria. The man is doomed before the helicopter even arrives. And helicopters didn't always arrive. Dust-off was the dream. Radio in, bird comes down, wounded man is airlifted to a field hospital. But that relied on too many variables. Was the weather clear? Was the landing zone safe? Were there mines waiting to blow the chopper sky high? Was enemy fire too heavy to risk the pickup? Too often, the answer was no. The bird never came. The soldier bled, shivered, and died in the mud, while his squad looked on helplessly. Even when evacuation worked, it was no guarantee. The field hospitals were overwhelmed, understaffed, and stretched thin. Dozens of men poured in daily, wounds ranging from shrapnel to snake bites to burns to infections. Surgeons worked around the clock, hands shaking, eyes bloodshot, equipment filthy. They amputated limbs to stop infections, sawed through bone while men screamed through morphine haze. They stitched together bodies torn apart by grenades, patched intestines back into shredded stomachs, pumped fluids into veins already collapsing. And for every man saved, another died. The traps were designed to make medical help useless. Poison spikes guaranteed infections that antibiotics of the time couldn't beat. Explosives sent shrapnel deep into muscle, tiny fragments impossible to remove. Mines mangled legs so badly that the only option was amputation, if the man lived long enough for it. Burns from fuel traps covered entire bodies, leaving skin peeling, nerves exposed, and no hope of recovery in a jungle with no sterile environment. Even snake bites laughed at medicine. Antivenom was rare, fragile, and often expired in the heat. By the time it reached the victim, it was too late. The psychological toll was just as bad. You watched your friend dragged away by medics, and you knew the odds. Maybe 1 in 10 actually made it back home alive and intact. The rest were carried off only to vanish into the system, dead within hours or crippled for life. Medical help wasn't hope. It was a delay. A way of stretching out the suffering so you didn't die instantly, and the screams stayed with you. Men writhing while morphine dulled the edges but didn't erase the agony. Medics sweating, cursing, hands red with blood that wouldn't stop. Tourniquets biting into flesh until it turned white, then purple. Bandages soaking through faster than they could be changed. You learned quickly that the jungle didn't care how many gauze rolls or pills you had. The jungle infected, rotted, and killed anyway. Even something as simple as dehydration worked against you. A wounded man needed fluids, but out here, the only water was swamp water crawling with disease. IV bags were limited, fragile, and often ran out. Medics improvised, but improvisation only went so far. A body in shock couldn't wait for supplies that weren't coming. And then there was the weight. Medics carried as much as they could, but their packs were heavy, and every extra pound meant slower movement, more exhaustion, more risk. They couldn't carry everything. They couldn't carry enough. Supplies ran out fast, leaving squads with nothing but filthy rags and desperate prayers. Even when men did survive, the wounds followed them home. Shrapnel fragments stayed lodged in bodies for decades, festering, aching, reminding them of the jungle every time the weather changed. Amputees lived with phantom pain, nerves firing where legs no longer existed. Infections ravaged bodies even after evacuation, leaving scars, twisted limbs, ruined health. Survival wasn't the end of it. Survival was just another sentence. And the enemy knew this. They designed traps to overwhelm medicine. Not just to kill, but to wound in ways that medicine couldn't heal. A dead soldier was one less rifle. A wounded soldier drained entire squads, medics, helicopters, hospitals. The jungle didn't need to kill everyone. It just needed to bleed the system dry. And it worked. Soldiers walked forward knowing that even if they survived the trap, even if they were hauled out, even if the medic reached them in time, it might not matter. Their war was already over, their body already ruined, their future already stolen. Medical help was never enough because it couldn't be enough. Not here. Not in this place where the traps were built to laugh at medicine, where the jungle had 1,000 ways to undo every bandage, rot through every stitch, and poison every wound. And you kept walking anyway because there was no choice. You walked knowing that if it was your turn next, no amount of morphine, no amount of gauze, no helicopter, no hospital could save you. All you could hope for was that the end came fast, because the alternative was lying in the mud, watching the medic's hands shake, realizing that the jungle had already decided you were finished. You think when it's over, that you'll get on the helicopter, leave the mud, leave the jungle, and finally breathe air that doesn't smell like rot and gunpowder. You think you'll step back into the world where floors are floors. Water is just water. Doors don't bite, and the ground doesn't explode under you. But that's the final trick. The war doesn't stay in the jungle. It follows you. It doesn't matter how far you go, how many years pass. The reality is simple. You never feel safe again. Back home, sidewalks should have felt solid. Asphalt streets should have been steady. But every step brought the same doubt that lived in you during the war. The brain doesn't forget what it learned out there, that the ground is a liar, that anything underfoot might collapse, that one wrong step can erase you. You find yourself staring at cracks in the pavement, patches of dirt in the yard, leaves covering the forest floor. Part of you knows it's nothing. Another part whispers that it could still be a trap, because once the jungle teaches you that lesson, it doesn't unteach it. Doors aren't safe either. You remember the ones that slammed spikes into ribs, the ones that swung down with nails, the ones that blew apart huts. A simple creak back home, the sound of a hinge groaning in an old house, is enough to make your chest tighten. You hesitate before turning handles. You glance at the edges for wires that aren't there. Every doorway feels like it could snap at you, because too many of them already did. Water doesn't wash the feeling off. Streams, creeks, even swimming pools drag you back to the swamps and paddies that hid spikes, mines and death. You step into shallow water at the beach and feel your legs tense, waiting for something sharp to slide into your foot. You wade out knee-deep, and your stomach clenches like it did every time you slogged through muddy paddies with your rifle overhead. The water looks clear, but your brain insists there's something under the surface waiting to swallow you whole. Sleep doesn't help. Closing your eyes is when the jungle gets loudest. You hear the click of a wire, the muffled thud of a buried shell, the sharp crack of a grenade, the hissing of a snake. You feel your body fall, the phantom weightlessness of trapdoors opening beneath you, the impact of spikes tearing into your legs. You wake gasping, drenched in sweat, clutching at blankets like they're a rifle. Morning brings no relief, just the same heaviness in your chest, the same dread of stepping forward into a world that doesn't feel trustworthy anymore. And the sounds. Fireworks back home don't sound like celebration, they sound like mines. A car backfiring sounds like a grenade going off. A hammer hitting a nail sounds like bamboo snapping. The soundtrack of your normal life is corrupted, warped into echoes of the jungle that won't fade. You flinch at noises nobody else even notices. People look at you strangely when you dive at sudden bangs. They don't understand, and you can't explain. How do you tell someone that your ears were trained to recognize death, and they never unlearned it? It creeps into everything. A box left on a porch looks like bait. A toy in the yard looks like an IED. A shiny piece of scrap metal catches your eye on the road, and you feel your stomach twist, remembering how every ordinary object once hid explosives. You know it's just trash, but knowing doesn't matter. The reflex is already in your bones. Don't touch it. Don't trust it. Don't believe that anything lying out in the open is innocent. Relationships suffer too. You can't explain why you don't like basements, crawl spaces, or attics. Why small rooms make your palms sweat. Why you check under the bed, behind doors, under rugs, as if spikes and wires might be hiding in a suburban house. Your family thinks you're paranoid, but paranoia was survival in the jungle. You don't just turn it off. You can't. And the body keeps all the score the jungle wrote on it. Scars from shrapnel that still ache decades later. Phantom pain from limbs that were amputated. Jagged wounds that healed ugly, twisted, swollen, never letting you forget the moment the trap caught you. Even men who walked out physically whole carried pieces of metal inside them. Tiny fragments of bombs and grenades lodged deep in flesh, reminding them with every ache, every twinge, that the war never really let them go. It shows up in silence too. The jungle was never silent. Cicadas screamed, frogs croaked, leaves rustled, water dripped. So when silence comes back home, it feels wrong. It feels like the moment right before a trap goes off. The stillness doesn't calm you. It builds pressure in your chest, like the jungle is holding its breath, waiting to snap again. You fill the silence with radios, televisions, anything to drown out the memory of how dangerous quiet really was. And then there's the simple act of walking. Nobody else thinks about it. They just walk, step after step, without hesitation, without scanning the ground. You watch them with disbelief, part envy, part dread. How can they move so casually? Don't they know what could be under there? Don't they know how easy it is for the earth itself to open up and ruin them? Of course they don't. They never learned. You did. And you'll never forget. The jungle carves something into you that doesn't heal. It wasn't just the wounds, the infections, the burns, the shrapnel. It was the paranoia. The constant awareness that nothing is safe, that every step forward is a gamble, that the world itself is armed against you. Back home, that doesn't fade. It lingers in every creak of a floorboard, every crack in the dirt, every shadow in the trees. The reality is cruel. You made it out alive, but you never made it out safe. And that's the part nobody tells you. They talk about bullets and bombs, about battles and victories, about who won and who lost. But the truth is, nobody who walked through that jungle ever stopped walking blind. Nobody ever put the fear down. You carry it forever, because the war was never just a place. It was a lesson burned into your nerves, and the lesson was simple. Nothing can be trusted, not even the ground under your feet. And that's the truth of it. A war where the ground itself was against you, where every step, every breath, every patch of jungle could be the last. It wasn't just bullets or battles. It was the constant grind of traps that didn't need to see you to kill you. The bamboo, the pits, the wires, the mines, the snakes, the mud, the water, all of it waiting, patient, hidden. And even if you walked out alive, the jungle stayed inside you. Because it was never just about surviving one more mile. It was about knowing you could never trust the world again the way you used to. That feeling, once it's inside you, doesn't leave. It waits in every shadow, every creak, every quiet moment. The war didn't end when you left Vietnam. It carried on in silence, in memories, in nerves that never unlearned the lesson. So if your eyes are heavy now, let them close. Let the noise fade. You've made it far enough tonight. The jungle can wait.